Chapter 850. F***CK. Who the F***CK wants to die? Seeing that someone dared to press down on his bottle, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but curse and roar loudly. Then he looked at the person beside him, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Because the person standing beside him at this time was someone he knew. It was a huaxia about 1.8 meters tall, but it could be seen that he wasn't small. He was wearing a black casual suit, had a crew cut, and looked very ordinary. He was the kind of person who couldn't be recognized in a crowd. But Qi Jingtao had a deep impression of this person. It's you, what's the matter? Seeing that it was this person, although Qi Jingtao was still very firm, his words unconsciously sounded a little timid, because he knew that he couldn't afford to offend this person, and the person behind this person, he couldn't afford to offend him even more. The young master is looking for you. Looking at Qi Jingtao, this person said very indifferently. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao also glanced at the second floor, and saw a young man standing at the door of a private room, waving at him. Seeing this person appear, Qi Jingtao didn't say much, immediately stood up, took the bottle of wine, and trotted all the way. And that person followed him all the way to the second floor. And soon Qi Jingtao arrived in front of the private room. Hey, young Master Zhang, you're in a good mood. Why are you here today? Pushing open the door of the private room, Qi Jingtao said with a smile on his face, and at the same time, he poured himself a glass of wine. At this time, there were a total of 7 people in this private room, but 4 of them were standing. These 4 people were like the person who went to call Qi Jingtao just now. They were all wearing black suits, and their heads were cut with knives and axes. They stood in the corner, and almost didn't move. If it weren't for their undulating mouths, and their heads turning from time to time, it would be difficult to tell that these people were alive. In addition to these 4 people, there were 3 people, 1 man and 2 women, and Qi Jingtao knew all 3 of them. The 2 women who were dressed very simply were the 2 stars of this nightclub. The nightclub was not only a place for one-night stands, or a place to collect corpses. In the nightclub itself, there were also some escorts or professional women who couldn't be described. The 2 of them were the stars of this nightclub. It was said that they used to work in the same management company. They were considered all-round artists. They had appeared in professional productions, acted in TV dramas, walked in shows as models, and stood on the stage as car models. Unfortunately, they didn't become popular after their professional productions, and no one watched their TV dramas. Their income as models was average, so they didn't have much fame. After the age of 25, which was the golden age, they came here to be professional women who sold wine. These 2 girls usually didn't go out with others. They just sold wine to earn a commission. If they wanted to go out, they had to be liked by them. The background of this nightclub was very strong. No one dared to use force under the foot of the emperor. Even if they liked someone, it would be 80,000 yuan per person for a night, and this was the minimum. Qi Jingtao also wanted to have some kind of relationship with them. But unfortunately, the Qi group was only a second-rate enterprise at that time. These 2 looked down on Qi Jingtao, and didn't agree even when he offered a price of 150,000 yuan. Although the Qi group was now a first-class enterprise, these 2 still looked down on him. In Qi Jingtao's view, these 2 were the top professional women in the circle of the imperial city. According to the ancient saying, they were the top artists. But from this side, it could also be seen that young Master Zhang's ability was here. He needed 2 people to accompany him. As for the man in the middle, needless to say, it was young Master Zhang. I rarely come out for a drink, but you annoy me. Tell me, what's going on? Looking at Qi Jingtao, who came over with a glass of wine, young Master Zhang casually waved his hand, and said indifferently. He wouldn't drink the wine Qi Jingtao brought. First, it was because he didn't trust the wine. Second, it was because he wasn't used to drinking that kind of wine. The wine he drank was the best. It's just some family matters. By the way, young Master Zhang, Qili has already refused to let you buy the cow. Looking at young Master Zhang, Qi Jingtao smiled awkwardly, and then sat on the sofa next to him. He deliberately kept a distance from the 3 people. Although Qi Jingtao was very interested in these 2 girls, he didn't dare to do anything in front of young Master Zhang. After sitting down, He took a sip of wine, and then said to young Master Zhang, because young Master Zhang was the one who wanted to buy the cow from Qili. Oh? Qili's courage is not small. She can directly refuse. Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, young Master Zhang couldn't help but frown. After sitting up, he picked up a piece of watermelon in front of him, and took a bite, and said with some surprise, "You know, this matter had been on his mind for several months. Qili didn't make up her mind earlier, because she was afraid of his existence. Why did she suddenly refuse? A cornered dog will do something desperate? Sigh, it's mainly because his husband came back. No one would have thought that these cows were his husband's." Listening to young Master Zhang's words, Qi Jingtao sighed helplessly. He really hated Jiang Hai to the core. Qili's husband, Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, young Master Zhang's eyes suddenly narrowed, and then said slowly, Young Master Zhang knows him? Hearing that young Master Zhang actually knew Jiang Hai's name, Qi Jingtao was a little surprised. Hee, only you don't know. Seeing Qi Jingtao's surprised look, young Master Zhang threw the rest of the watermelon into his mouth. He squinted his eyes and thought while chewing. Young Master Zhang's identity was still unknown. But in fact, in China, there were many people who knew Jiang Hai. Some people in politics knew Jiang Hai, because when Huaxia and Dubai were connected, Jiang Hai was the one who connected them. Even the emperor had heard about this. It could be said that Jiang Hai was one of the most influential people in the world. It was precisely because of this relationship that the Qi family was not too greedy, and did not have any information that could be used against them. No matter how powerful young Master Zhang was, he did not dare to touch them easily. Recently, he knew that although there was no news about Jiang Hai from Huaxia, Jiang Hai, pastures, and beef were quite famous abroad. Now that Jiang Hai was back, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. But he didn't care, because he couldn't touch Jiang Hai, not only because Jiang Hai was well known in China. At the same time, it was also because of Jiang Hai's current international influence, his territory in the United States, his connections with several manor owners in the United States, his connections with Du Feimin, and now his connections with South Korea. If this fierce dragon didn't express his intention to occupy the river, the original power in the river wouldn't trouble this dragon. Of course, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to look for trouble with this guy. It was not easy for others to touch him in China, but it was also not easy for him to touch others. After all, this person was not someone the Yin family could compare to. This is Jiang Hai. He is really hateful today. He dared to hit me. If it weren't for the fact that the Yin family pitied him, we wouldn't even have the money to bury his mother when she died. Now that he has become so powerful, he even dares to hit his master after coming back. Bah, this son of a bitch. Hearing that young Master Zhang also knew about Jiang Hai, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but vent his anger. He couldn't help but complain to young Master Zhang. After hearing his words, young Master Zhang just looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Seeing that young Master Zhang didn't respond to this topic, Qi Jingtao, who originally wanted to provoke young Master Zhang to help him deal with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Cough, young Master Zhang. If you want to be powerful, Jiang Hai is the biggest obstacle here. With him and Qili together, Qili seems to have a backbone. It will be difficult for us to put pressure on her. However, Qi Jingtao's face wasn't thin, so he changed the topic to something related to young Master Zhang. Oh, isn't this your business? Young Master Zhang picked up the wine glass in front of him, took a sip, and said indifferently. Hearing young Master Zhang's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed, because he really couldn't think of a way. After drinking another glass, he turned around and left with the excuse that he drank too much. Young Master, do you want us to invite Mr. Jiang over and let you talk to him in person? Seeing that there were no outsiders around, at this moment, the bodyguard couldn't help but come over and ask young Master Zhang. His words were very clear, but the meaning was very clear. Should they take action and bring Jiang Hai over? It seemed that they had done this many times in the past. The reason why Jiang Hai didn't open his business in China was mainly because he was afraid that some people would come over to invite him. You don't have enough face. That guy's strength is far beyond what you can imagine. However, Young Master Zhang knew very well that the current Jiang Hai wasn't someone they could invite over. So he smiled and said slowly. Then he stood up, picked up his clothes and waved at the 2 stars. One on each side, went downstairs, got into his car, and left. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. After he, Qi Li, and Du Ning had a good meal, the 3 of them sat at home and watched TV. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, Qi Li yawned and went back to sleep. As for Jiang Hai and Du Ning, it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Sometimes lightning and fire didn't need to be special. Not long after, there was a low voice in Qi Li's house, but it was only limited to echoing in the room. At around 12 o'clock, Jiang Hai returned to Qi Li's master bedroom and fell asleep with her in his arms. Chapter 851. The next morning, when Jiang Hai woke up after more than 8 hours of sleep, Qi Li and Du Ning had already left. After all, it was almost 9 o'clock. Qi Li was very good at this. She was responsible for herself. As long as she was working, she would go to the company at 9 o'clock every morning, including the time she and Du Ning had breakfast. She had been working for nearly 4 years, and she had never been late. Of course, no one knew whether she had overslept or not. Jiang Hai sat up in bed in a daze. He went to the bathroom and found a new set of towels, toothbrushes and toothbrushes. Looking at these things, Jiang Hai smiled. Then he hummed a song and brushed his teeth. After everything was done, he directly cooked a pot of hot pot noodles with the hot pot soup from last night. After eating, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa and thought about what to do later. Qi Li and Du Ning had said last night that they would have lunch in the company at noon. If Jiang Hai was free, he could go to the company to find them and have lunch together. In the evening, he would go to the steakhouse to inspect and have a meal. However, Jiang Hai didn't have the habit of eating in a restaurant. Besides, he didn't like to go to Qi Li's company. In Jiang Hai's life, there were 2 places he didn't want to go the most. One was the company, and the other was the school. It was because he was tired of going to school. Honestly, whenever he saw someone say that he missed the time when he was in school, Jiang Hai wanted to spit at him to death. What he missed was the time when he was a junior or senior. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of any good time to miss. At that time, he had enough credits and was familiar with the teachers. It didn't matter if he didn't go to class. Every morning when he got up, he would play games in the dormitory. He didn't have to worry about eating, because his father and mother would transfer money to his card every month. That was the real stress-free time. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of anything to miss about school. When he was in elementary school, he didn't know a thing. Every day, in addition to studying and doing homework, he might be bullied by other students outside the school, or even be punished by the teachers. Jiang Hai was such a big student. How could he dare to say that he hadn't been beaten or punished by the teachers in elementary school? In junior high school, the gap between the rich and the poor began to show. Teachers treated students who were good at their studies, students who were poor in their studies, students who were rich, and students who were poor. Jiang Hai still remembered his class teacher. She was such a snobbish person, who valued good students very much. In junior high school, he was in the 4th grade, but he was beaten by the teachers many times. In senior high school, there was no need to talk about it. From the first year of senior high school, he started to make up lessons. He arrived at school at 6 in the morning and left school at 8 in the evening. He was almost on the last bus back home. When he reached home, it was already past 9. He took a shower and continued to do his homework. It was good enough that he could go to bed around 11. He had to wake up before 5 in the morning, eat a careless breakfast, and then take the bus to school while dozing off. After all, he had to reach school before 6. If you told Jiang Hai that you missed school, Jiang Hai really wanted to scold you to death. What was there to miss? People shouldn't follow what others say. They should have their own ideas. At least, Jiang Hai didn't miss school at all. As for the other place he didn't want to go, it was the company. After Jiang Hai graduated from university, he went out to work. To be honest, working in the company was really similar to going to school. There were 2 types of people in the company. The first type was people who just dawdled. The second type was people who wanted to improve. People who wanted to improve had to learn to have several faces. Most of these people used to be class leaders or members of the student union in school. They flattered the teachers in school and the leaders in society, hoping to be a small official. They had to work like ordinary people during the day and socialize at night. Who would be tired if these people weren't tired? These people were probably the ones who missed school. As for those who were idling around, such as Jiang Hai, they relied on the company. If the company sent them a document, they could finish it in a week, not in 6 days. Basically, they handed in the task on time. And then the rest of the time, they relied on the company. Relying on getting off work wasn't that tiring. Basically, they just needed to get along well with their colleagues. Because they didn't have the urge to climb up. It didn't conflict with everyone's interests. However, this wasn't the life Jiang Hai wanted. This was because there would be this leader, and that leader wandering around every day. Although they didn't flatter him when they met, they still had to say good things. Others could also order you to do this and that. It was really annoying. This was Jiang Hai's life from 3 years ago. There would always be someone controlling you, telling you how long you sleep, how long you work, how long you do this, and how long you do that. Jiang Hai was so tired that he didn't feel tired at all. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that this was how it should be, but now when he jumped out of this circle, after he had money, no one asked him to do anything, no one asked him to wake up at a certain time, no one asked him to work overtime, and no one dared to stare at him. Now, when Jiang Hai was asked to go to these places, he would go to watch the fun. As for the rest, he wouldn't accompany them. Therefore, after going to the Qi group yesterday, he didn't have the intention to go again today. After all, he didn't want to take over the Qi group. It didn't matter whether he went or not. However, if he didn't go, it would be boring to stay at home. He wanted to go to the capital. But to be honest, he had already been to all the places he should go. In addition, now that the northern region had started to try to heat up, the smog in the capital was quite fierce. Jiang Hai didn't want to be a human flesh inhaler. Therefore, when he was hesitating, it was almost noon. It just so happened that there was a roast duck on TV. This made Jiang Hai a little excited. After thinking for a while, he remembered that he had been to the capital a long time ago. He had eaten at the Quanjude restaurant in Dadi, and the taste was quite good. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he prepared to eat a duck. Since this was Qi Li's home, naturally, it was impossible that there was only one car for her to go to work. There were 2 cars in the garage downstairs. One was a red Porsche 911, which she usually drove. There was also a BMW 750, which was more than 2 million yuan altogether. However, it was an old car from 5 years ago. It was Qi Li's car in the past. She used this car to go out to discuss business, and so on. However, since she had a Rolls-Royce, she didn't use it anymore. Jiang Hai thought for a while. After all, the Porsche was a car. Although it was fast, it was useless in the city. Therefore, he took the car key of the BMW downstairs. He drove the car and followed the GPS to Dadi. Speaking of Dadi, people in the capital should be very familiar with it. Right in front of the front door was a commercial street, which was called Dadi Lawn. Originally, it wasn't called this name. It was originally called Corridor Sitiao. It first rose in the Yuan dynasty and was established in the Ming dynasty. It began to flourish in the Qing dynasty. However, in 1900, the old lady recruited the Boxers to come to the capital. She wanted to use the Boxers to destroy the foreigners. This was also the excuse that led to the invasion of the 8-nation alliance. Then, the old lady declared war on the 11 countries at the same time. It was quite tough, but it also pushed Huaxia into the abyss. After the Boxers came to the capital, they burned down this street. After the reconstruction, it was not bad. The origin of the name Dadi was said to be in the first year of Emperor Hongji in the Ming dynasty. At that time, there was a curfew in the capital. In order to prevent thieves and the like from hiding in the streets and alleys, many streets in the capital were built with wooden fences. During the day, the fences were opened and closed at night, which was more convenient for management. Of course, these had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After a long time, Jiang Hai found a parking place and entered the street. To be honest, there were many small shops and restaurants on this street. But in fact, this place was more for foreigners. In fact, the locals didn't come here often. The Quanju that Jiang Hai went to was not the best. But it was the one that suited his taste the most. After entering Quanju, Jiang Hai found a place to sit down. He ordered a duck inside. This duck was several times more expensive than before. He waited for the dish to be served. Not long after, the chef came and cut the duck into slices in front of Jiang Hai. This kind of roast duck's skin was crispy and there was oil under the skin, so it was very fragrant. It could only be eaten when it was just cooked. Otherwise, it would be very greasy. After cutting the duck, Jiang Hai asked the chef to help him cook a soup. Then he began to roll the dough and eat it. He put shredded cucumber and sweet sauce inside. Jiang Hai didn't eat scallions, ginger, or onions. He could eat them when cooking, but he would pick them out. So when he rolled the dough, he didn't put them in. The meal was finished in a short time. There wasn't a single duck left, but there was a lot of soup left. After paying the bill, Jiang Hai prepared to stroll around the neighborhood. But before he could leave, two men in black appeared in front of Jiang Hai. One on the left and one on the right. They blocked Jiang Hai's way. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai frowned. He looked to the side and found that there were a lot of people watching the show. They were all looking at him with a smile. Watching a show was the nature of the Chinese. It was the same everywhere. But when he saw that there were people everywhere, and some people were even recording with their phones, Jiang Hai was relieved. He wasn't afraid of people blocking him. What he was afraid of was that someone would dare to make a move on him without him noticing. Since there were so many onlookers, Jiang Hai wouldn't be polite. Looking at the two men in front of him, Jiang Hai went straight to them. At the same time he said, "Hey, excuse me, excuse me." Chapter 852. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over directly, the two people who were blocking Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at each other. Although they were both wearing sunglasses, they could feel the ridicule in their companion's eyes. Jiang Hai is really arrogant. He actually dares to bump into me like this. Does he think that he can beat me? These people weren't ordinary people. They had all retired from the special forces. They were very familiar with Hua Xia's unique body hardening technique. Even in the face of the black and white ghosts who were more than 2 meters tall, they wouldn't be afraid, let alone Jiang Hai. Seeing Jiang Hai bump into them like this, the two people also gathered their energy and their dantian. They were ready to make Jiang Hai eat a turtle and show their strength. Seeing that they didn't intend to move aside, Jiang Hai also smiled. They would suffer a big loss if they underestimated him. As they shouted to move aside, Jiang Hai had already arrived in front of the two people. With a little force from his shoulders, he directly bumped into the two people's shoulders. The moment Jiang Hai's shoulders touched the two people's shoulders, the two people's faces changed drastically. The expressions of these two people also changed greatly. That huge force that came over really scared them quite a bit. What a joke! How could Jiang Hai's strength be so great? The moment the two of them came into contact, they almost felt like they had been hit by a galloping bull. That force was completely incomparable to humans. However, he had to admit that these guys were elites. When Jiang Hai forcibly knocked them away, they were already prepared to release the force. Their bodies moved horizontally, and they took a step back to the other side. Although they managed to release the force, they still felt pain from the collision. Sorry. Seeing the two people being knocked away by him, Jiang Hai didn't care. After a chuckle, he was about to walk out of the crowd. When the crowd saw that there was no conflict, they couldn't help but twitch their lips. Some people on the periphery had already dispersed. But at this moment, the two people who were knocked away endured the pain in their shoulders and took a few steps forward again. One of them also put his hand on Jiang Hai's shoulder. The moment his hand touched Jiang Hai's body also stopped. "What's the matter? Or do you want to blackmail me?" Stretching his neck, Jiang Hai looked at the two people in front of him and said with a flat face, "Our young master is looking for you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man endured the soreness in his arm and said to Jiang Hai, "If he is looking for me, ask him to come himself. What's the matter with two dogs?" With a disdainful smile, Jiang Hai said to the two people behind him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people's eyes instantly became vertical. They are not stupid. They naturally understand that Jiang Hai is calling them dogs. How can this not make them angry? Since Mr. Jiang doesn't want to, then don't blame us for doing it. Hearing that Jiang Hai dared to scold him, and even asked their young master to personally come and invite him, the other person's eyes flashed with anger. As he spoke, he stepped in front of Jiang Hai and punched directly at Jiang Hai's stomach. There are 3 weak points on the human body. The first is the nose. After being hit, the nose will be sore, tears will flow, and the brain will be easily shocked. When fighting with others, the nose is the key point to attack first. The second place is the vital part. Needless to say, whether it is a man or a woman, it will be very sad when the vital part is attacked. The third place is the stomach. As long as the stomach is hit, the person's stomach will twitch, and the whole body will be weak, nauseous, retching, and lose the ability to fight. Looking at this person's movements, it is clear that he wants to subdue Jiang Hai and teach Jiang Hai a lesson, but he does not dare to hurt Jiang Hai. But does he think that he can deal with Jiang Hai like this? He is really naive. Looking at the other person's fist, Jiang Hai did not dodge. He just looked at the other person with a smile. Bang! With a muffled sound, the person's fist hit Jiang Hai's stomach. Then he raised his head proudly. So what if he is strong? He has not learned professional fighting skills. How can he be a match for masters like them who have seen blood and killed people before? But when he raised his head, he was a little confused because Jiang Hai did not slowly fall down while holding his stomach as he thought. Instead, he stood there, picked his nose, and looked at him with slight disdain. You attacked first. I was just defending myself. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the pupils of the 2 people here could not help but shake. Then, they wanted to withdraw and retreat, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai's strength is not comparable to theirs. His speed is also not comparable to theirs. At the moment when they were about to retreat, Jiang Hai came in front of the first person and directly punched the other person's stomach. He has already restrained his strength in this blow, but even if he has restrained his strength, it is still not comparable to this ordinary person. These people have not reached the limit of the human body. Jiang Hai, who is 8 times the limit of the human body, is this not courting death? With a muffled bang, Jiang Hai's hand had already made intimate contact with the person's stomach. In an instant, like in a cartoon, this person was sent flying with one punch. He directly smashed into some people who were watching the show in the distance. These people also suffered an unexpected disaster. Seeing this punch, a lot of people fell down. The people next to them could not help but take a few steps back. What a joke. They were just watching the show and did not want to be beaten up. But these people were at most hit, and it was a little painful. But that person was miserable. After falling to the ground, he began to retch on the ground and instantly lost his fighting strength. Not only did he vomit everything in his stomach, but he also vomited acid and bile. It was really because Jiang Hai's punch was really not something he could withstand. Seeing that his companion was beaten, the person who was about to retreat over there was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously wanted to avenge his companion. No matter how bad it was, he had to save his companion. But his reason told him that he could not go. If he went, he would be finished. But did he think that he would not be finished if he did not go? Naive. While dealing with this person, Yi Zichen and the others were all dead. Jiang Hai's feet stepped on the ground, and with the rebound force, he instantly floated to the person's side. He also punched out, and then the person also lay on the ground and vomited. Looking at the appearance of these 2 people, Jiang Hai chuckled. Then, he thoughtfully glanced at an antique building in the distance. He could feel that there was a pair of eyes over there, seemingly observing this place. If he was not mistaken, the person over there should be related to this place. Jiang Hai was now considered to be skilled and bold. After seeing that the 2 people were dealt with, Jiang Hai went straight to the building in the distance. Although he was a person who was afraid of death, he was not timid when he was sure that he would not die. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, he did not seem to have any enemies in the capital at present. The only enemies were Qi Li and Qi Song's family. But just like how they still had to recognize their relatives, Qi Li could not, and did not dare to find someone to deal with him. because if they played dirty, Chili could kill them at any time. This was also the rule of the game. And the one who had the ability to cause trouble for Jiang Hai, what kind of young master was it? Most likely, it was related to the beef or the forage. In other words, it was the person behind Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. Since he was here and concluded that the other party would not dare to do anything to him, how could Jiang Hai not come to meet him? At least he had to know who his opponent was. In a few steps, Jiang Hai arrived in front of the small building. This small building was not high, and looked like it only had 2 floors. The decoration was antique. There was a plaque in front of the door with 3 words written on it, Guangda Building. Of course, there were some small words next to it, but Jiang Hai was too lazy to look at them. When Jiang Hai walked to Guangda Building, there was already a black-clothed person like the 2 people just now who had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, the person clenched his fist but still loosened it. Then he made a gesture of invitation. He naturally knew that Jiang Hai had killed his 2 companions, but he could not have a conflict with Jiang Hai now. He knew that the 2 companions were not worse than him. If there was a conflict now, he would probably have to lie down. He was not afraid of lying down, but he still remembered what his master wanted him to do. Seeing his action, Jiang Hai did not care. He went straight to the 2nd floor, and took a look when he went upstairs. At this time, there should be a show in Guangda Building, so it was a little noisy. After going up to the 2nd floor, not long after, he saw a private room with a black-clothed bodyguard standing at the door. Needless to say, this was the private room. Seeing Jiang Hai come up, the bodyguard also pushed the door open and motioned for Jiang Hai to go in. Jiang Hai did not care and just strolled in. After entering the private room, Jiang Hai saw a person sitting in the middle of the room. The other table was empty. After a glance, Jiang Hai walked over and sat on the other side. "Hello, Mr. Jiang." Seeing Jiang Hai sit down, the young man, who looked 25 or 26 years old, took a sip of tea. Then, without looking at Jiang Hai, he said with a smile, "If you have something to say, just say it. I'm going out in the afternoon." Glancing at this person, Jiang Hai casually grabbed a handful of sunflower seeds and ate them while looking at the stage in the distance. He was just wondering why it was so noisy. It turned out that there was a crosstalk performance here. However, Jiang Hai did not know the actors on the stage, and the reaction of the audience could only be regarded as ordinary. "I heard that Mr. Jiang likes to listen to crosstalk, so I specially chose this place. This is the youth team of Diyun Society. It's just an ordinary performance, but it's also Zhu Zhu Xing. I asked Mr. Jiang to come here mainly for a business deal." Seeing that Jiang Hai did not seem to be very interested in this crosstalk performance, the young man on the other side laughed and said. Chapter 853. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled as he ate his sunflower seeds. Although this person didn't say who he was, Jiang Hai knew that this guy's influence in the country was definitely not small. Knowing that he was here meant that he was paying attention to him. Knowing that he liked to listen to crosstalk meant that he had investigated him. He even knew about these small details. It was impossible that he didn't know about some basic information. Considering that he had appeared here, he knew that this person was watching him. From this point of view, it was clear that this person was watching him. Coupled with those bodyguards and his current fearless appearance, Jiang Hai knew that this guy should be 70% sure that he was the person behind Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. However, although he had a considerable status in the country, Jiang Hai wanted to say, "It's none of your business." His focus wasn't on the country. Jiang Hai was like this in all aspects. There were only times when others begged him, not when he begged others. This was because before he did anything, he had already paved the way for himself. Although the man in front of him wasn't someone to be trifled with, was he Jiang Hai someone to be trifled with? What a joke. Perhaps Jiang Hai couldn't compete with a big country like Huaxia, but he definitely wouldn't be easily manipulated by someone in the country. In Jiang Hai's opinion, there were many people in the country who had the ability to cause trouble for him, but this young man wasn't qualified. "I like to talk to smart people, but I don't like to talk to people who are too smart. Talking to smart people can save a lot of effort. As long as I point it out, They will know what they can and can't do. It also saves me a lot of effort. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't respond, the young man chuckled. Then he picked up his teacup and drank while shaking his head. He didn't care if Jiang Hai heard him or not. He continued talking. But I can't talk to people who are too smart, because these people are really too smart. I don't have a trace of fear in my heart. I'm used to being high and mighty, and looking at others with a gaze of charity. But when there are people who are on equal footing with me, I'm not so happy. He didn't look at Jiang Hai and spoke slowly. Haha, this is an illness that needs to be treated. Although I have never believed that all living things are equal, I also don't believe that there is such a thing as being superior to others. It's not an imperial system now, is it? Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. There were many people he cared about, such as those big families in the United States, the President of the United States, and those high-ranking officials. There were also people in China, such as the Emperor of China, and the 12 people who stood at the peak of power. No, not to mention those people. Even if it was a minister, Jiang Hai had to be polite to him. But if it was the son of the minister, the grandson of the minister, and so on, Jiang Hai didn't have to be so polite. Hee, you're just too smart. Fortunately, you're not in China now, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man chuckled. Although the two of them were talking in riddles, the meaning was already conveyed. Fortunately, I'm not in China, right? Looking at this person, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said to him, just now, the conversation between the two men seemed ordinary. It could even be said that it was a bit messy. But in fact, the main meaning, if translated, was something like this. What the man said was to Jiang Hai, you can't beat me. You don't have to play around with your little tricks. Do you think you can be on equal footing with me? You're just a rich man. And the meaning of Jiang Hai's words was, I'm just a rich man, but I'm not someone you can touch. You can't control me. No matter how powerful your power is, it has nothing to do with me. And do you dare to touch me? It's a legal system now, not an imperial system. The confrontation between the two of them flashed by, but it also sounded out the other party's intention. This man's idea was to suppress Jiang Hai with his power, and Jiang Hai's choice was to confront him head-on. If you have the ability, come and find trouble with me. If you don't have the ability, just sit there and do nothing. The two of them picked up their teacups almost at the same time, took a sip, and then put it down. Then the man stood up. I think we'll meet again in the future. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man said and took the initiative to leave. Jiang Hai also curled his lips. It didn't matter if they met or not, but it was up to him to sell or not. He wasn't worried about himself now. With his skills, even if no one protected him, he could live well. As for Qili, there wouldn't be any problems with Du Ning. But don't forget one thing. Fortresses were conquered from the inside. After this guy saw him, the Qi family would probably take action. Fortunately, when Qili wanted to open a restaurant, the shareholders of the Qi family disagreed. And then Qili opened the restaurant herself. Now only Jiang Hai and Qili held shares in the restaurant, so it wasn't so easy for others to make a move. Although it looks okay, I don't want to delay any longer. I have to resolve the situation with the Qi family as soon as possible. Jiang Hai muttered softly as he stroked his chin. As for dealing with Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong like he had dealt with the Yin family, that was impossible. But fortunately, the current Jiang Hai was much stronger than when he solved the Yin family. Problems that can be solved with money are not problems. If 100 million is not enough, then 200 million. If 200 million is not enough, then 500 million. If 500 million is not enough, then 1 billion. There is always a way to solve it, Jiang Hai said with a smile. In other people's eyes this was a problem, but in Jiang Hai's eyes it was not a headache. After watching the crosstalk for a while, Jiang Hai also left and went to his car. After getting in the car, he opened an ultrasound app on his phone, according to the method Azalina taught him, and then carefully searched the car. Sure enough, it didn't take long for him to find 2 small bugs. According to the situation of those people, these people should be able to use satellites to find him, so they didn't need to locate him. They only needed to eavesdrop, but Jiang Hai wouldn't even let them eavesdrop. After removing the bugs and crushing them, Jiang Hai also drove the car. Although he didn't want to go to Qi Li's company, he still felt that it was better to take a look. He drove all the way, and soon the Qi Group's building was in front of him. After parking the car in the parking space in front of the Qi Group's main entrance, Jiang Hai got out of the car. This time, the front desk didn't stop him, and the security guards didn't stop him either. At present, the entire Qi Group, including the ant sweeping the floor, knew that this tall and ordinary-looking man was their President Qi's husband, and also one of the people in the company who couldn't be provoked. After getting into the elevator, Jiang Hai pressed the button for Qi Li's office floor. In his mind, he was thinking about how to solve this problem simply and violently. But when he came to the top floor, he just walked out and found that the atmosphere on this floor was a bit strange. This floor was terrifyingly quiet. Even when they were walking, they would deliberately lower their voices. After seeing Jiang Hai, most people would be a little surprised. Then they would lower their heads and speed up their footsteps. Jiang Hai didn't catch them to ask what happened, because there was only one possibility to cause such an impact here. Qi Li was in trouble. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai quickly walked to Qi Li's office. But just as he walked over, he found that several security guards were standing in front of Qi Li's office at this time, blocking the office tightly. After seeing Jiang Hai coming, these security guards hesitated. They were told that no one was allowed to enter the office, but Jiang Hai, to be honest, they didn't want to be beaten because of a job, and the most important thing was that if they were beaten, they would probably lose their job. So after hesitating, these security guards chose to stand in place. Seeing that they were so obedient, Jiang Hai didn't make it difficult for these people. Instead, he walked directly into the office and pushed the door open. He found that Qi Li's originally big office was full of people at this time. These people were men and women, old and young. At a glance, there were about 20 people. Qi Li was sitting behind the desk with a gloomy face, and Du Ning was also standing beside her. These people were clearly divided into two groups. One group was more people, surrounding the desk in a half-moon shape, and the other group was standing behind Qi Li. It could be said that their positions were extremely clear. Who are you? This is an internal meeting of our Qi Group's shareholders. Those who have nothing to do with it, please leave. As soon as Jiang Hai walked in, he attracted a lot of attention. When they saw Jiang Hai, Qi Song's eyes sank, but he didn't say anything. Instead, a middle-aged woman who was closest to the door showed a trace of disgust after seeing Jiang Hai. She said unhappily, from her dress, it could be seen that she was a person who worshipped luxury goods. Everything on her was branded. Seeing that Jiang Hai dared to come in sportswear, it would be strange if she didn't feel disgusted. However, Jiang Hai looked at her and smiled disdainfully. He directly squeezed past her. In the crowd of people who were squeezed, Jiang Hai squeezed out of the crowd and came to Qi Li's side. Some people looked at her and asked what was going on. Seeing Jiang Hai come, Qi Li didn't know why, but she was relieved. It seemed that with Jiang Hai there was no need to worry. She shrugged and said to Jiang Hai, "Our restaurant is targeted by these guys. They are here to force us to abdicate." Seeing that Jiang Hai came, Qi Li didn't know why, but she was relieved. It seemed that with Jiang Hai here, there was no need to worry. Chapter 854. Abdicate. Miss Qi, don't think too highly of yourself. Do you think you're an emperor? Abdicate. We're just here to get what we deserve. Hearing Qi Li's words, before Jiang Hai could say anything, the middle-aged woman he had just knocked away had already shouted loudly. Hearing her words, many men frowned, but they didn't say anything. Instead, they continued to stay there. Although they also hated this woman, they were now on the same side. Tell me, what's going on? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. He didn't even look at these people and directly asked Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a middle-aged man standing behind Qi Li took a step forward. Let me explain. Xiao Jiang, I don't know if you still recognize me. The middle-aged man walked over and looked at Jiang Hai with a trace of relief in his eyes. Then he smiled and said to Jiang Hai, Uncle Zhao. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Chun Feng's shadow in the depths of his memory slowly overlapped with the middle-aged man in front of him. Yes, This man was none other than the vice president of the Qi Group, Zhao Jianjun. He and Jiang Hai were old acquaintances. In fact, they had known each other since Jiang Hai was born. He was younger than Jiang Hai's father and Qi Li's father. Now he was almost 50 years old. When Jiang Hai was born, he had just worked in the factory where Jiang Hai's father and Qi Li's father worked. Later, when Qi Li's father listened to Qi Song and went to the capital to make a living, he also went with him. Over the years he had been through ups and downs. He had always been the right-hand man of Qi Li's father. He had a very important relationship with Qi Li, being able to smoothly take over the company. He was also the witness of Jiang Hai and Qi Li's marriage. Although he was the witness of their marriage, he wasn't that great. But from this, it could be seen that Zhao Jianjun was still very close to Jiang Hai and Qi Li. Haha. A few years ago, I was still thinking about the marriage between you and Qi Li. Now forget it. I won't say it, I won't say it. Patting Jiang Hai's shoulder, Zhao Jianjun looked at Jiang Hai with eyes full of joy. Haha. I really didn't expect that the little brat at that time would be able to control the existence of a company worth billions. Haha. A few years ago, I was still thinking about your marriage with Qi Li. In fact, to be honest, he had always felt a little sorry for Jiang Hai. After all, he could be regarded as an accomplice who pushed Jiang Hai into the fire pit of the Qi family. So he had always felt guilty towards Jiang Hai. But in his view, this was actually an opportunity. If the original Jiang Hai was really a talented person, then with his relationship with Qi Li, when they entered the company together, the husband and wife would have joined forces. K's mentality of having a common enemy might have made them get closer and closer. But he never thought that Jiang Hai was just mud. At that time, he was immersed in the death of his parents and didn't have the heart to manage the Qi family's company. He was also full of complaints towards Qi Li. Yes, he almost became a villain. But fortunately, Jiang Hai's temperament was not bad. So he didn't succeed in becoming a villain and stayed at home for more than a year. Then he got the Dragon Ball. And then there was today's development. That year, Zhao Jianjun saw the situation between Jiang Hai and Qi Li and was worried. He even took the initiative to tell Qi Li that they should give Jiang Hai a chance to prove himself. After all, Jiang Hai was her husband, the man who left a mark in her life. But later, when he found out that Jiang Hai's ability had also grown, his thoughts turned into gratification. But he also heard that Jiang Hai's private life had some problems, which gave him a headache. But at this time, Jiang Hai appeared here, which meant that he still had Qi Li in his heart. And as the son-in-law of the Qi family, he naturally had the right to know what was going on here. According to Zhao Jianjun's words, these people were indeed here to force the Qi family to abdicate. When Jiang Hai returned to China, he helped Huaxia. So the higher-ups made the decision to exempt Jiang Hai and Qi Li's 4 restaurants from business tax. This meant that in addition to goods, labor, and water and electricity, there was pure profit here. At the beginning of the first year, it might not be much, but when the report came out last year, those people were shocked. Those 4 restaurants earned 300 million last year. The 300 million here referred to RMB, which also referred to the pure profit. In other words, the 300 million went into Qi Li's pocket. How could these people not be envious? The people present more or less had a few percent of the Qi family's shares. Those who had less than 1% were not qualified to stand here. This meant that if the 300 million were divided, they could at least get a few million, or even tens of millions. This was like giving out free money. Why wouldn't they be tempted? Therefore, under the lead of Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong, they immediately agreed to come here. Several board meetings were held to discuss the ownership of the 4 restaurants. Should they belong to Qi Li and Jiang Hai? Or should they belong to the Qi family? It could be said that these people were really shameless. When Qi Li first said that she wanted to build a restaurant, none of these people were optimistic. Now that they saw the profits, they wanted to take advantage of the peach. Qi Li was naturally not a person to be trifled with. Qi Li held the shares of herself, her 2 younger sisters, and her mother. It directly exceeded the control of the shares. No matter what these people wanted, as long as she did not agree, there was no way to implement it. Because she was not only the biggest shareholder, but also the chairman and CEO. With such a concentration of power, how could others brazenly challenge her? Therefore, these people began to play tricks. They said that it was not good to use the shares to speak, and that they wanted to raise their hands to vote. Chile would be a fool to pay attention to them. Seeing that Chile did not agree, these people came here to cause trouble. In fact, this was not the first time they came here to cause trouble. It was just that this time Jiang Hai came here. Oh, so that's what happened. These shameless people. After hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Jiang Hai smiled, then glanced at the people around him and said disdainfully. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people led by Qi Song suddenly became angry. Yesterday, Jiang Hai laughed and scolded them. They did not say anything because of Jiang Hai's martial arts. Now that Jiang Hai was clearly in a disadvantageous position, he actually dared to come and cause trouble for them? This guy was really courting death. Jiang Hai, this is our Qi family's business. Why are you blindly interfering? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Song could not help but stand up and point at Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Song's words, the others also followed. That's right. The older generation hasn't spoken yet. How can a junior like you have the right to interrupt? I heard that Qi Li's husband came from an unorthodox background. I originally thought it was a rumor, but now it seems that it is not true. That's right. If it wasn't because he couldn't make a living, why would he leave his home and go to the United States? The ignorant are really fearless. Who does he think he is? How dare he point fingers in front of us? Listening to the scolding over there, Jiang Hai dug his ears. He had to admit that these guys were really noisy. Ignoring these people's scolding, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at Qi Li and asked, Qi Group is a listed company, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also blinked. She was a little timid, but she still nodded. I remember that this branch company seems to have a way to dilute the shareholders' shares and then sell them to the public. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai smiled and said to her, there is such a saying, the diluted shareholders can get all the money from the sale. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Qi Li still did not know what Jiang Hai wanted to do, she had a slight outline in her mind. Then these people, all of their shares, dilute them. I will buy them all. Pointing at all the people standing there, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words in the room, except for Qi Li and Du Ning, everyone was stunned. They had never thought that Jiang Hai would dare to speak arrogantly. Did he think that he was buying fried chicken? Buying all of it? After a few seconds of silence, the people in the room began to quarrel. But this time, they were not scolding Jiang Hai for not respecting his elders, but saying that Jiang Hai's brain was damaged. He really couldn't see the situation clearly. Buying all of it. This was a bold statement, but there were less than 100 people in the country who had such ability. But coincidentally, they had all seen these people before. Even if Qi Song and the others knew that the beef was provided by Jiang Hai, they didn't think that Jiang Hai had the ability to buy it. Just like what young Master Zhang said, they didn't know Jiang Hai very well. They only knew that Jiang Hai raised cattle, but in their opinion, Jiang Hai's cattle were probably all supplied here. Those 4 restaurants were very profitable. Even if Qi Li gave all of it to him, it would only be 300 million yuan. What about the Qi Group now? After the fall of the Yin family, its market value was almost 30 billion yuan. Of course, it was referring to RMB. It was difficult to collect 1% of 300 million yuan, let alone all of it. Was there something wrong with his brain? Hey Jiang Hai, do you know what you are talking about? You're still too young. I will pretend that I didn't hear this. Qi Li, now you hurry up. Looking at the reaction of the audience, Qi Liangkai couldn't help but smile. He walked forward and looked at Qi Li. But before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai directly took out a card from his pocket and threw it on the table. Pa! With a crisp sound, a shiny black card appeared in front of everyone. Looking at the card on the table, many people who saw it clearly couldn't help but take a deep breath, because they were no stranger to this card. The American Express Company's 100 long black gold, unlimited limit. Chapter 855. Gulp. Seeing Jiang Hai throw the card on the table, many knowledgeable people subconsciously took a step back. Unlimited limit? What did that mean? It meant that even if Jiang Hai did not have so much money to buy everyone's shares, he could still borrow the bank's money to buy everyone's shares. This meant that regardless of whether it was his money or not, he was serious about what he said just now. But if you asked these people to sell their shares now, would they be willing to do so? Of course not. After the Qi family got rid of the Yin family last year, the total income for the first half of the year was 200 million yuan, and the income for the second half of the year was 1.3 billion yuan. In total, the net income for the year was 1.5 billion yuan. Among the shareholders present, the smallest one had received nearly 30 million yuan in dividends during the new year, plus nearly 10 million yuan in red packets. Now their stock price was worth about 600 million yuan. In 10 years, no, in less than 10 years, they could earn back their capital and interest. Most importantly, being a shareholder of the Qi Group was also a symbol of status in society. Did the coal bosses in Jin province have money? They could spend hundreds of millions as they wished. But did they have any reputation in the circle of the rich? This was the difference in social status. A rich person without any reputation would have to put his face on the ground to curry favor with the mayor in the country. Even if it was a village head, he would mess with him if he wanted to. Even if it was a village head, he would not dare to go against a village head or a village party secretary. But for the people of the Qi family, even if they were not as rich as them, when they went to other places, the mayor or village head would have to curry favor with them. They might not be seen in the capital, but when they returned to their hometown, they would be influential figures. Now that Jiang Hai directly said that he would buy the shares and give them the money, it would be strange if these people were not afraid. Most importantly, without the protection of the Qi Group, they were not sure if the money would belong to them after they got it. Ahem, Xiao Jiang, why do you want so many shares? There's no need to owe the bank so much money just because of a moment of anger. I've heard that foreign banks are even scarier than domestic banks. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little stiff, Qi Yuanlong stood up and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. At the same time, he winked at Zhao Jianjun. He guessed that Zhao Jianjun did not want things to be too stiff. Indeed, he was right, although Zhao Jianjun hated them. But he did not want things to be too stiff. After all, Qi Yuanlong and Qi Song were Qi Li's father's relatives, and there were many old officials here. Moreover, he did not know how much money Jiang Hai had. He did not want Jiang Hai to owe the bank because of anger. That would not be worth it. So after thinking about it, he wanted to talk to Jiang Hai. But before he could say anything, Jiang Hai had already waved his hand and stopped him. Uncle Qi, you don't have to persuade me. I don't care about this little money. As for owing the bank, that's even more impossible. With a wave of his hand, Jiang Hai slowly walked to Qi Li's desk and leaned on it, facing Qi Yuanlong and the others. As for me, some people here know me, some people don't. My name is Jiang Hai, Qi Li's husband. 3 years ago, I went to the United States to raise cattle. The beef that is the main signature of the 4 restaurants you mentioned is mine. But domestic beef is not my main source of production. My main source of production is the Walmart Group in the United States and the royal family in Dubai. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people's faces became more and more ugly. They had heard of Walmart, the world's largest retailer, and the royal family in Dubai was even more familiar. Last year, I paid the taxes on my beef and sold it for more than $1 billion. Oh, I'm talking about dollars. This year, the main fish, pasture, and beef in my manor are sold for more than $1 billion every year. Now, I really don't know how much money is in this card, but at least $5 billion there is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people gasped, including Zhao Jianjun. They didn't expect Jiang Hai to have so much money. Qi Li and Du Ning, the only people who knew about this, were looking at Jiang Hai with a smile. Qi Li really found that whenever Jiang Hai wanted to pretend to be rich, he was so charming. I'm not bragging. If I want to buy the entire cheese group, I can buy it. But for me, it's not necessary because the cheese group belongs to my wife. I don't care if you make some money with my wife. I didn't expect that you would dare to jump out and court death. You're really courting your own death. I think you don't even want this little money. Looking at these people with a faint smile, Jiang Hai said more and more. These people's faces became colder and colder. Now they couldn't say anything. They did come with the intention of taking advantage of the situation, but now it seemed that they couldn't take advantage of it. Instead, they had to consider whether they should pay back. At this time, they couldn't help but look at Qi Song, who was standing in the front. After all, it was he who sent these people to make trouble. If they lost their shares, they didn't know what to do. Just as I said, I'll take all their shares. Seeing that these people were silent, Jiang Hai turned his head and said to Qi Li. Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be joking, Qi Li nodded seriously. Then, she picked up the phone and prepared to call the Qi Group's lawyer. She saw that Jiang Hai didn't just want to frighten them, but wanted to play a serious game. On this side, Qi Yuanlong, Qi Song, and the others were all panicking. Qi Liangkai directly jumped out of the crowd and wanted to snatch the phone, but Du Ning's speed was much faster than his. He immediately flipped over the boss's table and blocked in front of him. Qi Liangkai also knew about Du Ning. It wasn't a day or two that they wanted to deal with Qi Li. Naturally, they also investigated the people around Qi Li. This Du Ning was sent by Jiang Hai. At the same time, they also knew that Du Ning's means were not ordinary. She once took care of 3 bodyguards of young Master Zhang alone, and nothing happened to her. According to young Master Zhang's people, this person had seen blood and killed a lot of people. She was the world's top bodyguard or mercenary. At this time, Zhang Liangkai felt that his blood was about to turn cold when Du Ning glared at him. Shaoli, we're all relatives. There's no need to make things so awkward, right? We know that it's our fault for being greedy, but there's no need to take our shares, right? How can we be relatives in the future? Not daring to cross Du Ning's line, Qi Liangkai could only speak to Qi Li there. Listening to his voice, he really wanted to cry because he didn't know what to do. Among the people present, the leaders were Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. But it was impossible for these 2 old men to be wrong. The only one who could be wrong was probably his big brother. Now he could only make a Hail Mary effort. Stop pretending. You guys are all wolf cubs. If we let you go today, who knows when you'll come back and bite us? When I'm not around, there's no one to support my wife. So instead of this, it's better to just wipe you guys out. After taking your shares, I'll go offline and won't let you ingrates get close to my wife. Hearing Qi Liangcai's words, Qi Li's eyes showed some hesitation. Just like Zhao Jianjun said, there were many old officials and relatives among these people. It was not good for her to kill them all. At this time, Jiang Hai spoke for her. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, there was a trace of despair in these people's eyes. Jiang Hai and the others were serious. If they really killed them, they would lose their shares and the company would go offline. At that time, what was the use of the money that Jiang Hai gave them? Billions, this was something that some losers could only dream of. But if one's mind was not set, one would not know that sometimes having too much money was not necessarily a good thing. If a child walked on the street with a brick of gold, wouldn't that be waiting to be robbed? Without the protection of the Qi group, they were not much different from children. They knew better than anyone who was safer. A billionaire who had nothing but money, or the shareholders of the Qi group. Especially here, this was Huaxia. Were you kidding? A place where a person's life and death could be decided with a word. Seeing the determination of Jiang Hai and the others, some people were already thinking about where they would go to live the rest of their lives after the shares were exchanged. More people looked at Qi Song, Qi Yuanlong, and Qi Liangkai with hatred. If it weren't for their flowery words, how could he have been blinded by lard? Instead of enjoying a superior status at home, and enjoying so much bonus every year, he would have come here to seek death with them. What a sin! At this time, the 3 people were completely dumbfounded. They never thought that Jiang Hai would be so decisive. Most importantly, Jiang Hai had enough strength and stamina to throw out billions of dollars. They were really too naive. Qi Yuanlong suddenly remembered what his son had said when he came back last night. He had said that he had met with young Master Zhang. He had wanted to persuade young Master Zhang to deal with Jiang Hai, but young Master Zhang had refused. Qi Yuanlong had thought that young Master Zhang did not want to deal with Jiang Hai because he was afraid of causing gossip and rumors about him being ugly. Now it seemed that he had really been too naive. It seemed that he knew Jiang Hai's background. He knew that Jiang Hai wasn't someone he could casually bully, so he was scared. He was scared, but he still sent his people to charge and break through the enemy lines. Now it seems like they were all trapped, and they didn't have any way to get out of this predicament. Chapter 856. What should we do? What should we do? Qi Yuanlong walked to Qi Song's side and kept whispering. Qi Yuanlong knew his own family's situation. Like his son, Qi Yuanlong used to fantasize that he was a business genius. Of course, because the company was still helmed by Qi Li's father. Although he lost a lot of money, he did not touch the foundation of the company. Now that he was older, his ambition had also been restrained. Now he was basically trying to smooth things over by asking for benefits. However, he never thought that the only time he was greedy in his old age would be when he had to face such a decision. Qi Li's father was easy to deal with. He was his biological brother, and the two of them grew up together. Naturally, it was impossible to kill him. He was a real relative. However, Qi Li did not think so now. In the past few years, he knew better than anyone how much Qi Li hated him. Most importantly, they were now living their own lives. The relationship between their families was not very good. Now that Jiang Hai was in charge, there was really nothing he could do about it. He could only keep asking Qi Song what to do. He did not want to let go of the power in his hands. Jiang Hai, you are determined to go against us. Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Song was also a little scared at this time. He did not think that Jiang Hai would dare to control the existence of the Qi family. Actually, Qi Song did not take Jiang Hai seriously from the beginning. He really did not think that Jiang Hai and Qi Li would be such a big deterrent. Thinking of this, Qi Song took a step forward and said loudly to Jiang Hai, "Go against you? No, I'm just privatizing the Qi family. It's that simple, and you will get the money. I've put the real money here. This is what you want. It's that simple." Looking at Qi Song in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. Then he looked at Qi Li and asked if she had made the call. "I've already informed the company's lawyer. He's now coming over with the transfer procedures." Looking at Jiang Hai's gaze, Qi Li also smiled. Suddenly, she felt a little tired. As a woman, when dealing with some small matters in the company, she was still very good. But when dealing with these big matters, she was a little indecisive. Although she usually pretended to be cold, she knew in her heart that sometimes she thought too much. As the old saying in Huaxia goes, "The merciful do not command soldiers, emotions do not make decisions, righteousness do not grasp wealth, and kindness do not make officials." As a woman, her emotional nature made it impossible for her to be as decisive as Jiang Hai and act boldly and decisively against these old officials. Suddenly, she even felt a little emotional. It would be great if Jiang Hai could manage the Qi family with her. However, this thought only flashed through her mind because she knew Jiang Hai's character very well. This guy was used to being free. If you let him manage the company now, it would be more difficult than killing him. Most importantly, he was used to crushing others. Seeing that Qi Li had finished, Jiang Hai also smiled. Then, he looked at the people in front of him curiously. He wanted to see what these guys could do. Qi Li's words were not only heard by Jiang Hai, but also by these people. "Everyone, this adulterous couple is not going to give us a way out. Let's fight with them." Qi Liangkai saw that Jiang Hai was really going to kill them all. At this time, he couldn't help but be so anxious that his eyes turned red. And the people who were like him were the people behind him. So he rolled his eyes and a vicious plan came to his mind. With a loud roar, he wanted to encourage the shareholders who had lost their shares to riot. As soon as he shouted, many people responded, especially the auntie just now. She rushed to the front without saying anything. "You little bitch, you dare to take my shares. I will fight with you." The auntie made threatening gestures and rushed directly to Qi Li, but Du Ning was faster. He took a step forward, grabbed the person's hand, and pulled her forward. Then he hit the person's chest with his knee. The huge impact directly smashed the woman back. She lay on the ground and couldn't get up. Other people saw that Du Ning still dared to fight back, so they didn't say anything. They rushed over like crazy and were ready to fight. But at this time, the security guards who were originally guarding the door squeezed into this office. The leader was none other than Zhao Jianjun. Just now, when Zhao Jianjun saw that the situation was not good, he had already gone out to call these security guards. Now it was just right. Block these guys for me and then drive them out of the office. From now on, they are no longer shareholders of Qi's group. After seeing the security guards come in, Qi Li also stood up with a cold face and said loudly. Hearing Qi Li's words, these security guards naturally knew who paid them, so they directly pushed these people out of the door. No matter how weak these security guards were, they were still young and strong, far from being comparable to these middle-aged and old people. They were directly driven out. At this time, the security guards were also in place. 2 of them carried one person and went directly to the elevator. They would be directly driven out. Their shares were entrusted to the lawyer. As long as the company's lawyer came, Jiang Hai would sign the contract and then transfer the money to their cards. Then they would have nothing to do with Qi's group. Seeing that there was no room to turn things around, these people also shouted here. Some other people were already thinking about how to escape at this time. Yes, escape. These people's butts were not clean. They used to be shareholders, so it was not good to say anything. But now that they were no longer shareholders, things were troublesome. There were probably a lot of people who would come to find them. You will die a horrible death. You will go to the 18th level of hell. I will not let you go even if I become a ghost. Listening to the roars of these people before they left, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had to admit that people were really the most shameless animals in the world. These guys could come to force him to abdicate, but he couldn't take their shares. How could there be such a reason in the world? It was true that only the state officials were allowed to set a fire, but the common people were not allowed to light a lamp. And the most important thing was that the position of the state officials and the common people were the opposite. The Qi family was the major shareholder. Only the common people were allowed to set a fire, but the state officials were not allowed to light a lamp. Even in the whole world, there was no such reason, right? This time, you are our biggest shareholder. Seeing these people being taken away, Qi Li also suppressed the thoughts in her heart. Since Jiang Hai had decided, then she naturally could only support Jiang Hai's idea. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also chuckled. Yes, if you don't listen to me in the future, I will dismiss you as the chairman. Hearing what Qi Li said, Jiang Hai also leaned over, hugged her waist, tapped her nose and said with a smile. Humph. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also wrinkled her small nose. She didn't believe that Jiang Hai would dismiss her. Ahem, I say, today's matter is over. As for what you said, little Jiang, about the privatization of the company, looking at Jiang Hai and Qi Li acting as if there was no one else around, Zhao Jianjun also coughed softly, then said to the two with a smile. Hearing Zhao Jianjun interrupt her, Qi Li couldn't help but blush. Then she sat down again, but she also looked at Jiang Hai. She also wanted to know what Jiang Hai meant in this regard. Privatization must continue. I don't intend to make money for others, but for the shares of the uncles here. If you want to sell, I will buy them at 1.5 times the market price. If you don't want to sell, you can continue to make money in the company, but privatization and delisting are inevitable. Hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said very seriously. Originally, whether Qi's group would be delisted or not had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. But since it had come to this point, delisting was inevitable. The so-called listing was to expand the company's influence, using some shares to exchange for private property to expand the company. There were basically 2 reasons for delisting. The first was because the company was bankrupt and had to be delisted. The second was because the company had expanded to the limit. Moreover, the company's senior management was no longer willing to make money with the shareholders. They wanted to make money by themselves. Therefore, delisting was inevitable. Jiang Hai didn't have the slightest interest in the listing advocated by those financial scholars. His Tunglong company, his manor, and his brand were not listed now, and he was not short of money. Why should he be listed? He had to make money with others. He could make money by himself. Although the influence may not be as good as that of a listed company, the current cheese group and Jiang Hai did not need any influence. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, Zhao Jianjun and others also looked at each other. They saw the determination of Jiang Hai. After Jiang Hai annexed the shares of these people, he and Qi Li's family had shares, and there were also the scattered shares on the market. Together, they had nearly 85% of all the shares. Zhao Jianjun held 5%, and the remaining 4 people held 2% and 3%, adding up to 10%. Even if they objected with 15%, it was useless. The matter was decided in this way. Looking at Jiang Hai's decisive look, Zhao Jianjun could not help but sigh. He really didn't think that since the death of Qi Li's father, the company's biggest crisis would be so calm under Jiang Hai's understatement of strength. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it before, but he didn't want to play with those people anymore. But they did not have that kind of strength, and now Jiang Hai was really a fierce dragon. Chapter 857. What happened next had unknowingly become much simpler. In fact, it was not too complicated. When Jiang Hai was willing to spend 6 billion yuan to buy the shares in these people's hands, things became very simple. With money, lawyers, determination, and no external interference, the Qi Group's integration was really fast. Jiang Hai had only stayed in the capital for a few days, but he had already become the largest natural shareholder of the Qi Group. He owned 25.3% of the shares alone. Qi Li, Qi Jie, Qi Ya, and Qi Li's mother did not account for 20%. These 4 people together only accounted for 60%. With Jiang Hai's participation, it was equivalent to Jiang Hai and the others accounting for 85.3%. Zhao Jianjun and the others understood very well. Of course, it was impossible for them to withdraw their shares. They were all willing to listen to Jiang Hai and Qi Li's ideas, so the Qi Group was actively preparing for the withdrawal at this time. On the other hand, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong's house was surrounded by angry shareholders that night. Now that they were angry in their hearts, they needed a place to vent their anger. They did not dare to provoke Jiang Hai. Qi Li couldn't be provoked either. If they came to find trouble, it was inevitable that they would die. Of course, there were also some people who hoped that they could shamelessly act pitiful in exchange for their shares. But this was simply impossible. After learning that this road had been sealed, these people vented their anger on the 2 sinners, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. Because of this, the 2 families did not dare to return home. That night, they went to find young Master Zhang. Young Master Zhang's real name was Zhang Quan, and he still had some power in the country. The details of these forces appeared in front of Jiang Hai that night. Although Du Ning was not a specialized intelligence agent, he was still able to gather information. However, as long as Jiang Hai and the others wanted to find out this information, it was not a difficult thing to do. Zhang Quan's family situation was similar to that of the Red 3 generations that often appeared in urban novels. His grandfather used to be a major general in the founding of the country, but after those people retired, his grandfather finally became a lieutenant general. His father had a total of 3 brothers. His eldest uncle was in the army, and was now a brigadier general and chief of staff in a military region. His father was on the official road, and was currently a municipal official in a prefecture-level city. His third uncle was in business, and was now running a company that combined private and Chinese companies. It had to be admitted that such an identity was already an easy existence in other novels. Unfortunately, for Jiang Hai this was reality, not a novel. If Jiang Hai was just an ordinary person who knew how to raise cattle, some melodramatic things might happen. But the problem was that Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. He was one of the few big farm owners in the eastern United States. He was the biggest personal cash cow in Massachusetts. He even had some connections with the Republican Party in the United States. He had connections with the former godfather of television in the United States. He had close ties with the royal family in Dubai. He had business dealings with South Korea. Such a person was no longer someone the 3rd generation could touch. Only his eldest uncle had the right to choose the enemy for their family. Jiang Hai was a rich man who did not develop in the country. No matter which force it was, they would want to curry favor with Jiang Hai. It was absolutely impossible for them to become enemies with Jiang Hai. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai had grown into a towering tree. His strength was obvious to all. Although Jiang Hai's cattle made money, they all knew how difficult it was to get into the cattle business. Therefore, it was better not to earn money. Therefore, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong were driven out without seeing anyone that night. Knowing that the matter had been settled, the two of them couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Since things had already come to this, what else could they do? Qi Song was still fine. Without the Qi Group's shares, he still had some business in the capital. Don't forget that Qi Song had come to the capital first before calling Qi Li's father over. Originally, his business in the capital was much bigger than Qi Li's father's. Although he had mainly focused on the Qi Group, his own business had not been closed down. Apart from the 8% shares of the Qi Group, his other businesses added together were worth about a few billion yuan. Even if he lost the biggest part, he still had the ability to protect himself. It was just that the company had fallen from a first-class company that had borrowed the Qi Group's prestige to a second-class or even third-class existence. However, he could still establish himself. As for Qi Yuanlong, it was over. That night, he told his son, Qi Jingtao, that he wanted to return to Bingcheng. Recently, they had been preparing intensely. As for Qi Jingtao's wife, LVC, she had also been implicated. To Qi Li, LVC was originally a useful person. To be honest, her standards were not much worse than Qi Li's. It was just that she had chosen the wrong side. Business was similar to politics. A new emperor would bring in new ministers. You had rebelled and rebelled before, and you were also a core member. Therefore, Qi Li would definitely not use her again. This was considered a loss of a talent. No matter what these people thought or what they thought, Jiang Hai felt a lot more relaxed at this time. The crisis of the Qi family was solved by him so quickly. Not only was the Qi family safe, but his and Qi Li's 4 restaurants were also safe. However, the only thing that made him a little unhappy was that Qi Li was obviously busy these days. Jiang Hai's shares were also entrusted to Qi Li. He was too lazy to care about these things. These days, if he was not at home, he was walking around the capital. Unfortunately, he did not have many friends in the capital. The only person he knew was the person he met in Dapan Garden when he went to buy the white jade bed. However, they were not very close. Therefore, Jiang Hai was quite bored staying here all day. At this time, he received a call from Fu Yuan, telling him that Xiang Hua's wife had given birth to a son. Therefore, Jiang Hai decided to return to Bing City. Logically speaking, if Jiang Hai wanted to return to Bing City, Qi Li should also follow him. However, recently, Jiang Hai's acquisition project and privatization made her very busy. There was no way for her to leave. In the end, she could only book a ticket for Jiang Hai to Bing City. Soon the day arrived. Jiang Hai, Qi Li, and Du Ning spent a night together. The next morning, he took a car and went to the airport by himself. In fact, Qi Li and Du Ning had already woken up, but they knew that Jiang Hai didn't like to be separated, so they didn't wake up. However, Qi Li secretly made up her mind that she must integrate this place as soon as possible, and then go to find Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't think about this. He was just thinking about whether he should buy something for Xiang Hua's son when he went back. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai and his friends gave the same amount of red packets. If they gave 1,000, then they would give 1,000. If they gave 500, then they would give 500. There was no such thing as giving more red packets to those with better financial conditions. Jiang Hai didn't care about it, but he also had to consider Fu Yuan and Su Wei, so they gave 1,000 yuan each. However, he knew that Xiang Hua's family wasn't very well off. He could give some other small things, but this wasn't a gift. After thinking about it, except for some children's clothes, there didn't seem to be anything else. Therefore, before he left, he specially went with Qi Li to buy some children's clothes. This could be considered her kind intentions. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai put his things away and sat in the first-class cabin of the domestic flight. This plane was a small plane. The so-called first-class cabin was just a sofa that was more comfortable for 4 people in a row. It wasn't like the first-class cabins on international flights. For example, Jiang Hai's plane had its own exclusive space. He could lie down, watch TV, play on the computer, and play with his mobile phone. It was just that there was no signal. He could also make calls, but he had to use a satellite phone. The phone cost was very expensive, and the soundproofing effect was excellent. He could see the sky outside. If he wanted to eat something, there was a special chef on the plane who would cook it for him and deliver it to him after it was done. There was a special bathroom in the bathroom. Everyone could take a shower in half an hour. Of course, this was limited to first-class passengers. The domestic small planes didn't have so many options. Of course, the ticket price wasn't expensive enough to buy a car. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai checked his luggage and buckled his seatbelt. He was ready to sleep. Beijing was not far from Bing City. It took 7 hours to get there by train, and it took about 2 hours to get there by plane. So before Jiang Hai woke up, the plane had already landed at Bing City Taiping Airport. After getting off the plane, Jiang Hai couldn't help but see the people in the waiting hall. Oh, it was really complete. Su Wei, Fu Yuan, Xiang Hua, Huang Yunfei, and 2 of Jiang Hai's former friends. One was Wang Yong. This person was Jiang Hai's elementary school and junior high school classmate. He wasn't a good person. Sometimes he was quite righteous, but sometimes he was a little depressed. He especially liked to listen to his wife. Although his wife was not married yet, she had been with him for 5 or 6 years. She was very obedient. Wang Yong's high school classmate was Wang Yong's high school classmate. His character was a little timid, but fortunately, because Jiang Hai didn't hang out with Wang Yong in the later years, Wu Ming, who he met through Wang Yong, didn't hang out with him too much. But today, it seemed that everyone was quite complete. Yeah, you came back by yourself. Where's your harem? Seeing that only Jiang Hai came back with a bag, Su Wei asked him with some doubts. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also shrugged gently. What harem? How many girlfriends does this guy have? Hearing Su Wei's words, Wang Yong also asked with some doubts. Hearing what he said, the people next to him also told him, and everyone began to laugh. Chapter 858. These are the clothes for your son. My wife helped me pick them. After laughing in the airport lobby for a while, they decided to go to eat double-cooked pork, and then everyone returned to their cars. Among Jiang Hai's group, only Jiang Hai and Xiang Hua did not have a car in Bing City, so the 2 of them got in Fu Yuan's car, and the others drove their own cars. Now cars were cheap. The cars these people drove were cheap, expensive, and so on. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai also gave the stack of children's clothes in his backpack to Xiang Hua, and Xiang Hua took it with a smile. Xiang Hua didn't understand these things. In his opinion, these children's clothes were just of good quality. However, Fu Yuan, whose family was well off, could recognize that these clothes were basically only from 2 brands, Bonpoint and Teeny Weeny, both of which were luxury brands in the children's clothing industry. Each piece of children's clothes cost a few thousand, and these were still considered cheap. Jiang Hai, you are really rich. This stack of clothes is almost tens of thousands. Looking at these clothes, Fu Yuan said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Xiang Hua was shocked. He really couldn't see that these things were worth tens of thousands. Oh, it's not much money. If you have children in the future, you will also have money. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai patted his chair and said with a smile. For Jiang Hai, this money was really just a small amount of money, and there was no need to add too much pressure to Xiang Hua. But obviously Jiang Hai thought too much. After Xiang Hua learned that these clothes were worth so much money, he did not say that he was afraid of the pressure. Instead, he looked at them with curiosity. Jiang Hai thought that if it were not for the fact that he couldn't fit into them, he might have tried them. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's good to be so carefree. Along the way, the 3 of them talked and laughed. Soon, they came to the place where Jiang Hai wanted to eat double-cooked pork. Jiang Hai should have introduced his favorite dish in detail. This dish was invented in Bing City, and the most famous one was the chef's house. Legend has it that this dish appeared because of a chef from the Daotai province. Since Bingqing was located in the Heilongjiang province, it was close to the Soviet Union since ancient times. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the military strength of the Soviet Union put a lot of pressure on Huaxia. As the front line, the officials at the end of the Qing dynasty were interested in making friends with the Soviet Union. The Daotai here often entertained Russians, but everyone knew that the food of foreigners was mainly sour and sweet. Therefore, the chef at that time improved the salty and fresh spicy grilled pork strips and made it into double-cooked pork slices. At first, it was called double-cooked pork slices, but because the Soviets said that the sound of exploding pork slices was bun, it was renamed double-cooked pork slices. This dish could be said to be the most famous dish in Bing City. Other than this dish, it should be demori fish stew. Jiang Hai likes this dish very much. That's why every time he returns to Bing City, he would eat this dish many times. At the restaurant, everyone ordered. There were a total of 7 people, and 6 dishes were enough. It was not that Jiang Hai and the rest were stingy. Everyone who had been to Bing City knew that if they went to some restaurants in Bing City, the size of the dishes would scare them to death. It was not rare for 2 people to eat one dish in Bing City. To put it bluntly, a dish in Bing City was comparable to 3 dishes in Shanghai. This was because the people in Bing City were used to eating this way. Therefore, the living expenses in Bing City were not considered high. Of course, the income was also much lower than Shanghai, Jiangsu, and Zhejiang. It was at least 1/3, or even half of the income. The difference was huge. After the dishes were served, Jiang Hai and the rest stopped chatting and started to eat. After a bowl of rice, the dishes in front of them were almost finished. Because everyone except Jiang Hai and Xiang Hua drove, no one drank. They only drank some soft drinks and water. It's only 6 o'clock now. Do you want to go out and have some fun? Seeing that everyone was almost full, Huang Yunfei took a sip of water and then said mysteriously to the people in front of him. Hearing his words, the faces of the people here were a little strange. Jiang Hai looked at these people. He naturally knew what Huang Yunfei meant by having some fun. Since Jiang Hai's family had that accident, he also deliberately alienated these friends because he felt a little embarrassed. He could not hang out with them. After all, when he was most worried, he could not even eat. But Huang Yunfei, Wang Yong, and Wu Ming had always been in contact with each other, because the 3 of them had a common hobby: playing. Of course, the playing here was not to play games, but to play some special professions that all men knew. Jiang Hai had played before when he was in the United States, but he had not been there for a long time. Because he had a lot of girls in his family, he did not need to go out to hunt for these wild animals. In addition, he had dealt with 2 girls last night, so he did not really want to go now. But when he saw that the others did not object, he did not say anything. It did not matter if he went. They were going out to play together. He did not need to be a wet blanket. Sure, but where are we going? There is no good place recently. Hearing Huang Yunfei's words, Wang Yong thought for a moment and said hesitantly. He was also a master in this field, and the reason why he liked his girlfriend so much was actually related to this. His girlfriend knew that he liked to go to these places, but she did not make him wear a green hat, and she did not leave him. Wang Yong's family opened a small clothing factory. It was very busy and tiring in the summer. Every day, he would be busy until the second midnight. In the winter, there was nothing to do. He had to rely on himself, but his girlfriend had never left him, so he had to have a good relationship with them. I know a place that is okay, and it is cheap. Hearing the words of the 2, Wu Ming thought for a moment and said. Wu Ming was the last to join Jiang Hai's gang, but he was the first to get married. Now his son was 3 years old. He entered this line under Wang Yong, but it seemed that he should have graduated from the apprenticeship now, and he was better than the master. Stop. I don't want to go to the cheap place. I have a harem. I don't want to get into any trouble. As soon as he heard Wu Ming's words, Jiang Hai raised his hand and stopped. He knew his own situation. He didn't like to wear a raincoat. If he went to those cheap places and got infected with something, cough, then he would be sorry for his women. Of course, with Jiang Hai's current physical fitness, It was estimated that he would not get infected with any diseases. But who could say for sure? I know a place. There are cheap and expensive places. What level of consumption do you want? It depends on the situation. At this time, Fu Yuan thought for a moment and said. Hearing what he said, everyone was quite interested. Then let's go and have a look. Seeing that everyone seemed to be interested, Huang Yunfei on this side also spoke first. Then, under his urging, Wang Yong went to pay the bill. And then they got in the car and went to the place mentioned by Fu Yuan. Along the way, Huang Yunfei also added Jiang Hai to a WeChat group. They talked about all kinds of information about some of Bing City's specialty industries. Now the professional women in this business were basically distributed in several places. Otherwise, they would go to the lowest-end places like hair salons, massage parlors, and the like. These were also cheap. The better ones were some dark bathing centers. The price was at least twice as expensive as hair salons. The quality might be slightly better, but it was basically the same. But if you want to go to the best places, you have to go to the clubhouse. Yes, in the past, such places were often called nightclubs, clubs, and the like. But now, they were called clubhouses. This time, Fu Yuan brought Jiang Hai and the others to a club. On the surface, it was a place for singing. Of course, it was also a place for singing. But when singing, there would always be some girls who would come and accompany you in singing and so on. At this time they had to separate. Different appearances, different grades, and naturally the price was different. What was the grade? What was the price? How much was a night? How much was a session, etc.? Jiang Hai was a little confused when he heard this. He really didn't know that there was such a thing. Soon, Fu Yuan drove Jiang Hai and the others to the most development area, parked in front of a clubhouse, and then walked up with familiarity. The waiters outside the door were very energetic and polite. They even helped to press the elevator button. Not long after, Fu Yuan brought Jiang Hai and the others to that floor. As soon as they got off the elevator, they saw 2 rows of girls wearing cheongsams with waist-length slits and black shawls. They stood there neatly. When they saw Jiang Hai and the others coming down, they said loudly, "Welcome to XXX Clubhouse." This lineup made Xiang Hua and the others, who had never been here before, a little confused. "Yo, you guys, do you have a reservation?" At this moment, a middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 50s came over with a smile. This guy was wearing a pink sequined suit, and his hair was dyed blonde with white. Looking at his smile, Jiang Hai didn't know why he wanted to punch him. "No, are there any big rooms?" As Fu Yuan spoke, he took out a red RMB from his pocket and handed it over. The middle-aged man took it with a smile and naturally put it in his arms. "Of course there are. Are you VIPs? Come at any time. This way, please." After receiving the money, the middle-aged man smiled and led Jiang Hai and the others to the private room inside. Not long after, they came to a private room. Jiang Hai glanced inside. He had to admit that the private room here was very big. The lights inside were not as dark as the KTV when he went to sing before. Instead, it was very bright. The leather sofa and the big TV all showed that this place was very high-end. Chapter 859. Come and take a look at this place. We have the most luxurious VIP private room here. It costs 1,888 yuan. I think all the bosses here are rich and won't make things difficult for us. After leading Jiang Hai and the others to the private room, the middle-aged man spoke with a somewhat strange Mandarin, with a smug look on his face. F***CK. I haven't even entered the house and it's already 2,000? Hearing what he said, Wang Yong and the others, who were used to getting 150 a day by the roadside and 600 a day by the better ones, couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't help but cry out softly. "It's fine. I'm just here to have fun. I'm quite interested in this place. I'll pay for the room." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai waved his hand. Since they were out to play, he didn't need to be as stingy as before. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone was silent. The middle-aged man also laughed. It had to be known that these people all had commissions. There was a commission for the private room fee, and so did those professional women. According to the previous Hong Kong movies, this middle-aged man was the legendary Mumu Sang. Come, come, come. Everyone take a seat first. The 1888 VIP room is quite suitable. We'll give you a fruit platter for free. We'll give you as much as you eat. Now let's take a look and order some wine. After letting Jiang Hai and the others in and sit down, the middle-aged man here smiled and handed over a lot of drinks list. Jiang Hai also glanced at it. There were two options written on it, single order and set meal. However, the price of the wine made even Jiang Hai raise his eyebrows. The wine on the list was divided into 3 grades, beer, foreign wine and red wine. However, the cheapest bottle of Corona cost 400 yuan, and the best grade, Remy Martin XO, cost 20,000 yuan. Was this guy trying to scare Jiang Hai that he had never drunk foreign wine before? Or were there too many rich people in the country? 20,000? What the hell was wrong with this guy's head? A bottle of XO cost less than $200 overseas. You could even buy it in supermarkets. 20,000 here? It shouldn't sell for more than 2,200 yuan in China. 10 times the price. What the hell was this? When they saw the wine on the table, not only Jiang Hai, but the others also looked at Fu Yuan as if they had seen a ghost. If it weren't for the fact that they had played together since they were young, they would have really suspected that this guy was a fake. Ahem. The wine on the list is not only the wine, but also the money of those professional women. The single order is for a one-time meal, and the set meal is for the whole night. Looking at everyone's gaze, Fu Yuan coughed lightly and said slowly. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, everyone understood. So that's what he meant. 400 yuan for a haul of beer wasn't considered expensive. It seems that this isn't the first time this boss has come to our place. Our recent set meal is more suitable. Recently, in order to celebrate the National Day, my store manager has given a big discount. For a set meal that costs more than 5,000 yuan. In addition to the main dish, we also have a small snack. They are all newcomers. Their skills may be average, but they are very good. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, the middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. What the hell? What does this have to do with the National Day? Giving him a middle finger, Jiang Hai and the others here were so angry that they laughed. Is this how you celebrate the National Day? Now it's really a holiday, and you want to have a promotion. This industry is also doing it. The economy is not good. It's not like you don't know. It's better to have something cheap than nothing. Come on, what do you want to order? Shrugging pitifully, the middle-aged man said helplessly, and then asked the crowd. I'll go to the beer bar and see what's going on first. Among the crowd, Xiang Hua, who had the least bullets in his pocket, was the first to speak. 400 yuan was still within his acceptable range. He couldn't afford it if it was more expensive. I'll go to the beer bar. Hearing his words, Su Wei couldn't help but speak immediately. Come on, I'll have this. This is 600 yuan beer. Is there any difference between 600 yuan and 400 yuan? Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, Wu Ming thought about it and said to him. There is a difference of 200 yuan. There is not much of a difference. The people are the same, but the life is different. But you can rest assured that our beer is also quite good. While writing, the middle-aged man here also said with a smile. I'll also give it a try for 600 yuan. 600 yuan was still within the acceptable range. Wang Yong thought about it and said. I'll have the most expensive one. Come on, I want this 1,500 yuan. When it was Huang Yunfei's turn, he couldn't help but grit his teeth and said to the middle-aged man. Hearing his words, the middle-aged man also smiled. Although he also made some money, how could he make more than 1,000 yuan? What he mentioned was the same. How can 600 yuan and 1,500 yuan be the same thing? I'll have 1,000 yuan. When it was Fu Yuan's turn, he looked at it, then calculated the money in his pocket, and said to the middle-aged man. There are rules for doing this kind of thing. For example, eating and drinking can be treated to by buddies, but doing this kind of thing can't be treated. Everyone is doing their own thing. So everyone is thinking about how much money they have in their pockets. Boss, what about you? Seeing that the 6 people have finished choosing, the middle-aged man also came in front of Jiang Hai and asked him. If Jiang Hai wants to play naturally, he won't play those cheap ones. Give me the best one, 20,000 yuan. After that, Jiang Hai's finger pointed to the top line. I'll make it up 20,000 yuan? Jiang Hai, are you crazy? You want to play this kind of game, and you want to spend 20,000 yuan? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone here was stunned. Jiang Hai is really rich. They really didn't expect that Jiang Hai would spend 20,000 yuan. I'm just playing. I don't care much about this small amount of money. Just this one. Waving his hand with a smile, Jiang Hai was also a little curious. With his wealth, not to mention 20,000 yuan, 200,000 yuan, 2 million yuan. 2 million yuan, he has to think about it. But he doesn't have any pressure for less than 200,000 yuan. He doesn't say that he has a lot of money, but he definitely has a lot of money. Well, we don't understand the world of the nouveau riche. Go down and arrange it. Don't fool us with those inferior goods. I have been here more than once or twice. Seeing that Jiang Hai has chosen, Fu Yuan also said seriously. Of course, lend me some courage. I don't dare to fool the bosses. This boss, 20,000 yuan is the set meal. I'll go down and prepare it for you right away. Wait for me, I'll be right there. Listening to Fu Yuan's words, the man's face was full of wrinkles and said, by the way, call a princess to pour us wine and order songs. Seeing that the man was about to leave, Fu Yuan couldn't help but add another sentence. After the man made an okay gesture, he quickly left. Not long after, a girl in a woman's suit came in. This person is not a professional woman. This is a princess. The so-called princess is not a professional woman, but a person who specializes in pouring wine and ordering songs for the guests in the private room. She relies on the rewards of the guests to make a living. There is no commission for the wine. Of course, she will not accompany the guests to do anything. She can't even touch them. The minimum reward for the princess is 300 yuan. Of course, if she is pleasing to the eye, it doesn't matter if it is higher. As for how high it is, she will tell you. It depends on her own ideas, but Jiang Hai won't do such a boring thing. Soon the wine was served first. The wine ordered, in addition to the extras, naturally also had wine. It seems that everyone is ready to drink. They have probably asked for leave tonight. The wine they ordered just now can't be served here. They must go to a hotel outside to get a room, and then study the contents of the wine. They also can't book a room for an hour or a night. Tonight, they will be staying there. That's why it's fine to drink some wine now. Of the four who ordered beer, it was naturally impossible for one person to drink a whole haul. Jiang Hai also ordered 2 bottles of beer. After the beer was served, not long after, the middle-aged man came over with a row of professional women. Compared to the princess, these professional women are dressed more simply. It's already the end of October. It was already very cold in Bing City. It was now night time, and the temperature was below zero. Although there was a heater in the private room, it was not very hot. At least Fu Yuan and the rest were wearing jackets and did not feel hot. But these professional women were all wearing hot pants or miniskirts. The short miniskirts that showed off their thighs and tummies. If they were not wearing a vest, they were wearing a shirt. It was very seductive, and their looks were all very similar to those of the professional women. Although they don't have the kind of stunning feeling at a glance, at least they are not ugly. The quality is good. Seeing these girls come over, Xiang Hua spoke first. This quality is comparable to 800 yuan in other places. Wu Ming also whispered. He was also very satisfied with the appearance. Everyone, these are the beer quality girls. If there is anyone you like, you can tell me at any time. Nearly 20 girls came in and lined up in front of Jiang Hai. Then the middle-aged pervert came out again and shouted loudly. Listening to his words, Xiang Hua, Su Wei, Wang Yong, and Wu Ming on the other side carefully picked the girls. Not long after, they selected 4 girls. The girls also nodded to them, then sweetly called them boss, and then sat next to them. These girls earned not only the money for the beer, but also the commission for the wine. They saw that Jiang Hai asked for another 2 bottles of beer. The 4 of them divided it equally, and each of them got an extra 100 to 200 yuan. Seeing that the people on the beer side were done, the pervert left with the rest of the people. Fu Yuan and Huang Yunfei were even more excited at this time. The beer quality is already so good. Their wine hee. Chapter 860. Hello, bosses. Just as Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan were looking forward to it, the middle-aged man outside the door came in again. This time, he only brought 6 or 7 girls with him. However, even Huang Yunfei could see that the quality of the girls were better than the ones from beer. Not only were their faces very good, the makeup on their faces wasn't particularly thick, unlike the ones from beer. It was obvious that the makeup on their faces was heavier. Without the makeup, you wouldn't be able to tell what they looked like. Moreover, the makeup on these girls was relatively light. It can be seen that they were very confident in their looks. In addition to their looks, their figures were also better than those girls just now. Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan couldn't help but be tempted. The reason why Fu Yuan knew about this place was because of his job. Fu Yuan's job was road inspection. That was to say, after someone repaired a road and a bridge, they would be sent to test it and issue a test report. Then they would be considered qualified. In this line of work, they naturally had to curry favor with the higher-ups. Otherwise, if those officials said that you were not qualified to do this line of work, then you really were not qualified to do this line of work. And their so-called earning money was to do a test when they went there. Those who knew how to be a good person would give him some money in addition to the company's money. This was also his main source of income. He came here to accompany a client. This place was designated by the client. Otherwise he wouldn't know. Second from the left, first from the right. After the people stood, Huang Yunfei and Fu Yuan's eyes were like scanners, sweeping over the girls in front of them. It didn't take long for them to choose the one they liked. Thank you, boss. Hearing that they were chosen, the 2 girls over there couldn't help but nod. Then, they called out sweetly, walked to the 2 men's side and sat down. In the end, only Jiang Hai's best was left. To be honest, it looked like thousands of girls had this level. The others also became interested in Jiang Hai's. What was the best? They also wanted to see it. However, even though they wanted to experience it, they weren't going to sit around and do nothing. With the arrival of the girls, the atmosphere in the room rose again. As a man, with a girl sitting next to him, it would be strange if his heart didn't race like a horse. For a moment, they were no longer satisfied with their words. Their hands unconsciously climbed onto each other's waists and legs. Their elbows occasionally rubbed against each other's indescribable places. But these girls didn't care. There was an even more intense activity coming up, so what was this? Therefore, they were very open and played with them. At the same time, they also asked about the situation of these people. According to them, this was called communicating first. After all, it was not a roadside stall where they could leave after eating. They still had time to play. At the same time, many girls went to the karaoke counter to sing and dance. The atmosphere was very lively. But at this moment, the middle-aged pervert walked in again, this time with 4 girls. When the 4 girls appeared, Fu Yuan and the others couldn't help but scream. At the same time, they stared at the 4 girls. They had to admit that 20,000 yuan was indeed worthy of its price. With this price, there was nothing to say about the quality. These 4 girls in Jiang Hai's eyes were about 80 points. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were third-rate stars. They were almost on the same level as Aphrodite and the others in his manner. But one side was a foreign girl, and the other side was a Huaxia girl. When Jiang Hai saw one of the 4 girls, he was stunned for a moment. Then he looked at Su Wei in the distance. Su Wei also saw this girl, and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he looked at Jiang Hai. It seemed that they recognized this girl. At this time, the middle-aged pervert also came over. Boss, this is the main dish of our latest 20,000 yuan EXO Remy Martin superset. These 4 are our top stars. Don't look at them just because they are beautiful and have a better figure. In fact, these 4 girls have a strong background. This girl is a former model. Her figure can be said to be the best in our shop. And her temperament is cold and elegant. This girl is a graduate of the Imperial College of Music. Her voice will definitely make you feel that the 20,000 yuan is worth it. This girl is a graduate of the Shanghai Academy of Drama. She specializes in classical dance. She will make you feel like the emperor doesn't attend morning court. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the middle-aged man introduced them one by one. and Jiang Hai's eyes were mainly looking at the last person. Her. After hearing the middle-aged man's introduction, Jiang Hai also pointed to the person who graduated from classical dance and said to the middle-aged man, "Okay, Huan thank the boss." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man here immediately said with a smile, "Thank you, boss." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the girl named Huan couldn't help but smile at Jiang Hai. Then she nodded and made a bow. It can only be said that she is worthy of practicing classical dance. She really has a classical style. Next is the trainee. "This is from us. Boss, take a look." After Huan bowed, she sat next to Jiang Hai, and the middle-aged man here took out an iPad from nowhere and handed it to Jiang Hai. There are many photos on this iPad. Of course, they are all photos of girls, similar to the existence of artistic photos, but the clothes are a little simple. Jiang Hai looked at these photos in front of him. He was a little stunned. Trainee? Now he is still struggling with this title. Trainee. What the hell is this training? AI life is like this. There is always a need for training. No one is born to be a professional woman, right? Therefore, our company is the same as some companies in South Korea. Professional women are divided into S, A, B, and C levels. The beer level is C level, and the wine level is A and B level. Among them, a level refers to those who have more than 5,000 points. You are S level, and those who have just arrived and haven't reached C level are trainees. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man also said with a smile. Hearing what the middle-aged man said, Jiang Hai couldn't help sweating. It's really enough. I can't see the real person. How can I choose? But since it was a set meal, Jiang Hai didn't come here to pretend to be a saint. He lowered his head and looked at it. But to be honest, just looking at the photos, Jiang Hai really couldn't make up his mind. What kind of person does the boss like? If you like someone who is more innocent, you can choose her. She just came out of school. If you like someone who is more sexy, you can choose this. Her body is very good. If you also like someone like me, you can choose this. She is my junior. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little hesitant, Huan, who was sitting here, also came over and recommended to Jiang Hai with a smile. Jiang Hai looked at her strangely, and finally chose her junior. Okay, today is really a happy ending. All the bosses actually chose at the first try. It's really a miracle. I'll arrange it right away. Seeing that Jiang Hai had chosen, the middle-aged man here also shouted loudly. Seeing that no one paid attention to him, he walked down a little awkwardly. Not long after, a girl in simple clothes appeared outside the door. She was different from those who had been on the battlefield for a long time. At this time she was still a little shy. She walked over and knocked on the door. After seeing Huan, she quickly ran over, and then sat on the other side of Jiang Hai under Huan's signal. She just sat there, not talking or looking at people. However, Jiang Hai glanced at her. She was really good looking. What's the boss's name? Seeing that everyone was here, the atmosphere in the room rose again, and Huan also opened her mouth to talk. She poured a glass of wine for Jiang Hai, then asked Jiang Hai with a smile. My surname is Jiang." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also felt a little awkward and then said slowly, "Hello, Boss Jiang. Where did Boss Jiang get rich?" Hearing Jiang Hai's reply, she also smiled and then said, I'm abroad. You really don't know me? Chaopeng?" Looking at the girl named Huan in front of him, Jiang Hai asked tentatively. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then she carefully looked at Jiang Hai. She was very sure that this person should know her since he called her name, but she really had no impression of him. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also smiled and waved his hand, then said to Huan, Hee, don't think about it. I'm your high school classmate, but we're not in the same class, so you shouldn't have any impression of me." Thinking of this, he really couldn't help but feel that the world had changed. Chaopeng used to be a famous person in high school. In her first year of high school, she was their freshman representative and joined the student union. Jiang Hai still had some impression of her. When she introduced herself on stage, she said that her name was Chaopeng. The name Peng was taken from a sentence in the national wind, Chao Feng, and Xia Quan. Peng Peng Shu Miao, Inyu Ointment. There was a king in the 4 countries, Sun Boji. At that time, Jiang Hai and Su Wei were just ordinary young people yawning under the stage, and she was a goddess. It was said that after she graduated, she went to Shanghai to learn dance. Her professional level was still very good. Later, it was said that she went to act in a stage play. But he didn't know what happened. Why did she come here now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chao Peng couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. But then she said with a smile, "Hee, it seems that you are really classmates. It's a bit awkward to say that. But even if you are classmates, there won't be a discount." Chapter 861. Are you prey? We are hunters. Early in the morning, a shrill ringtone sounded. Jiang Hai groped for the bedside in a daze, and found the phone that was still ringing from the pile of things. He glanced at the caller ID, and couldn't help but pat his head. Mayor Wallace. Why is he looking for me so early in the morning? Glancing at Chao Peng and another girl named Xiaozhua, who were still sleeping beside him, Jiang Hai hung up the phone first. Then he got up in a daze, and went to the bathroom in the suite to wash his face. He looked at himself in the mirror, and recalled the scene from last night. In fact, there was nothing to recall. After all, if he thought too much, it would be censored. Jiang Hai could only say that the atmosphere last night was good. Everyone left around 11 o'clock. Jiang Hai took Chao Peng and Xiaozhua to the hotel together. In fact, Fu Yuan and the others were also here. It's just that they had booked an ordinary standard room, while Jiang Hai had booked a suite. After entering the room, there was no need to describe what they did in detail. They did a lot of things. Recalling Chao Peng and Xiaozhua's bodies, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little impulsive. He had to admit that the 2 girls' dancing skills were quite good. Their bodies were soft and flexible. As long as they wanted to do something, they could do it. For example, standing in a split-air train and pincer attack. Cough. Jiang Hai didn't know what these idioms meant. They should be idioms. Anyway, his language wasn't good. After taking a shower in the bathroom, Jiang Hai left the bathroom and went outside to put on his clothes. Looking at the 2 girls who were still sleeping, he took out 30,000 yuan from his pocket and put it on the table. The 20,000 yuan from last night had already been paid when he left. Now the 30,000 yuan was specially taken out by Jiang Hai yesterday. It was a reward. After all, it let Jiang Hai experience a different kind of feeling. After putting the money away, Jiang Hai left. It was none of his business how they wanted to split the money. After leaving the room, Jiang Hai looked at the time. It was only 7 in the morning. Fu Yuan and the others didn't have work today, so they could sleep a little longer. Jiang Hai sent a voice message in the group, telling them to find him at the restaurant. After that, he went straight to the restaurant. After ordering a glass of milk and 2 sandwiches, Jiang Hai sat there and looked at his phone. After thinking for a while, he called Mayor Wallace. Although he didn't know why Mayor Wallace was looking for him, he thought that something must have happened. Hey Jiang Hai, I'm really sorry. I forgot that you went to the east. Haha, I hope I didn't disturb you. Hearing that Jiang Hai called back, Mayor Wallace also said with a smile, I did, but it doesn't matter. I'm up anyway. What's the matter, Mr. Mayor? Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai also rubbed his temples, and then asked him with a smile. Oh, I'm really sorry, but this matter still needs to be decided by you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also shrugged. Listening to his voice, he didn't sound very sorry. He said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Indeed, with his relationship with Jiang Hai, he wouldn't go to the line just because he woke up Jiang Hai. Well, tell me what's the matter. Listening to Mayor Wallace saying that he must make the decision, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He took a sip of milk and asked Mayor Wallace. He was really a little curious. The thing is, it's about the tourists who want to go hunting. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace thought for a while and said, the fact is mainly about the tourists who want to go hunting. Winthrop is not far from the Alabama mountains. Everyone knows that although there are many Americans, most of them are concentrated in the cities. Because the mechanization is quite powerful, there are not many people in the countryside outside the cities. In addition, the environmental protection is good. Of course, it refers to the protection in recent years. Therefore, wild animals from all over the United States often come out to cause trouble, such as crocodiles in the south, brown bears in the northwest, and wild boars and deer in the northeast, which is Jiang Hai's side. These are all disasters. Jiang Hai can hardly forget the deer disaster last year. He almost died. Now the head of the buck is still hanging in Jiang Hai's house. This is very dangerous. It is precisely because of last year's deer disaster that this year's weather forecast said that this year's winter will be colder than last year. Cold means that there is nothing to eat. The deer in the Alabama mountains are likely to go down the mountain. At the same time, there are also reports that this year, not only are there more deer in the Alabama mountains, but there are also more wild boars. Both of these animals may go down the mountain. And if the deer go down the mountain, it is possible that the carnivores that usually eat the deer will go down the mountain. In order to prevent this disaster, this year, the Massachusetts government ordered every town near the Alabama mountains to go into the mountains to hunt deer and wild boars. If a certain quota is reached, there will be space in the mountains to cope with the increase of deer and wild boars. It will also not be like the previous year, where they lost so much property and even casualties. After receiving this news, Mayor Wallace also sent this news to every family. Before it snows, they should quickly go and hunt deer. This way it will save them a lot of trouble. But after this news was sent out, many people who have homestays will inevitably let the tourists know. After the tourists know, they will report to the town through the villagers, hoping to participate in this hunting. After all, this is hunting. In China, except for the rich and powerful, almost no one hunts. Although they can play with guns in Winthrop's shooting range, shooting targets is not as fun as hunting animals. These people who often come to Winthrop to play are already a little restless. After learning about this matter, Mayor Wallace also felt a bit of a headache, because it was not easy for him to talk about it. If he says no, it will affect the enthusiasm of these investors. But if he says yes, what if there is a problem? So he is also quite tangled. After thinking about it for a day, he suddenly thought of Jiang Hai, so he called Jiang Hai. He didn't expect to wake him up. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also thought for a while. It is not impossible. He gently knocked on the glass and asked these tourists to go into the mountains to hunt. The first thought that came to Jiang Hai's mind was no. What a joke, these people are tourists, Huaxia people, and they don't have a gun license. If there is a problem, who can they find to reason with? It is very likely that if there is a problem, not only Winthrop, but also Jiang Hai's soaring dragon manor will be affected. But on second thought, this may also be an opportunity to make money. What do you mean? Hearing Jiang Hai say that it is not impossible, Mayor Wallace was also stunned for a moment. Then he asked with some doubts. Jiang Hai was also worried about what he was worried about. If there is an accident, then their Winthrop's reputation will be ruined. This matter still has to be discussed with the state. We can take the lead to do such a training. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai's mind was also thinking quickly. Soon he thought of a way. According to Jiang Hai's words, they can discuss with the state. They will provide tourists, and the state will be responsible for providing guns and guards, the so-called police and the like. They will play the role of protection, and also play the role of supervision. As for the recruits, they had to undergo 3 days of military training. At the very least, they had to learn how to follow orders. This military training could be handled by the town's police station. After all, the police station also had its own playground and such. If they want to go hunting in the mountains, they will have to pay a deposit, and sign a contract. If they are not obedient in the mountains, the deposit will be deducted. When the time comes, they can split the money with the state government. As for how much to split, it will be discussed later. But there is no doubt that even if it is split 28% with the state government, Jiang Hai is willing. This is because not only will they be going hunting, but it will also open up a tourism route for Winthrop. Most importantly, no one will carry camouflage, tactical vests, military bags, field tents, and so on from the country. When the time comes, this will also be a way to stimulate sales. Whether it is selling or renting, Winthrop will make a lot of money. Most importantly, these people who will participate in the hunting are all rich people. When the time came, using the deer that they had killed themselves to make deer head specimens or something, it would probably be very popular. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace on the other side was dumbfounded. Originally, he just wanted to find an opportunity to take these tourists to have fun, but he really didn't expect there to be so many twists and turns. As expected of a capitalist, you came up with a solution so quickly. Okay, I will talk to the state government tomorrow. Mayor Wallace also said with a smile. Jiang Hai's brain is really fast. I'll also ask Moses Adams to come along. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Just Mayor Wallace going to talk to those guys who are involved in politics? Jiang Hai is not assured. On the contrary, he will be relieved if Moses Adams goes. Mayor Wallace also knew his situation, so he agreed readily. After a few more pleasantries, Jiang Hai hung up the phone. When he hung up the phone, he found that the other people had already appeared in the restaurant. But they all looked sleepy. Jiang Hai also smiled. Over 25 years old, it is obvious that their physical strength can't keep up. Chapter 862. This is pretty good. I will definitely come again when I have time in the future, but the private room fee is a bit expensive. Sitting next to Jiang Hai's table, everyone ordered their own breakfast. While eating, Huang Yunfei said with a smile on his face, "There are cheaper ones. There won't be so many people next time. So there is no need for such an expensive private room." Hearing his words, Su Wei also smiled and continued. The money for the private room and wine last night was paid by Jiang Hai, and he didn't care about this small amount of money. As for the money for the fun, of course they paid their own way, because in this business, there is no such thing as treating. Then, everyone sat down and began to study the events of last night. Looking at them talking excitedly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head, feeling a little funny. These guys are really bored. After talking about last night's story, they began to study where to go today. I saw you on the phone just now. Why are you in a hurry to go back? Looking at Jiang Hai, Su Wei couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai. In their view, Jiang Hai rarely comes back, so naturally, he will stay for a while before going back. But Jiang Hai doesn't have so much time. Hearing what Su Wei said, Jiang Hai also nodded. Winthrop wants to organize tourists to go into the mountains to hunt. And I need to go back and talk to the state government. Are you interested in going back with me? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to them. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, a trace of expectation flashed in the eyes of everyone here. But it quickly disappeared. Although they want to go, the problem is that they really can't go. They still have to work. And they don't have so much time. Since these buddies can't go, Jiang Hai also has to arrange his own itinerary. After returning to Bing City, he must visit Xiang Hua's son and Qi Li's mother. These are only 2 days. Jiang Hai's relatives, it's fine if he doesn't visit them. Anyway, he has no contact with them. As for his friends, it's about a week. After setting the time, Jiang Hai also called American Express. This is the power of his Centurion card. He can ask American Express to book a plane ticket for him from the capital to New York in a week. At the same time, he was also thinking about the problem he was thinking about when he came, the problem of buying a plane. So he explained his idea to American Express's customer service, after learning that Jiang Hai wants to buy a private plane. Less than a minute after American Express hung up, an invitation card appeared in Jiang Hai's email. Jiang Hai opened it and saw that it was an invitation from Boeing Civil Aviation, which is the subsidiary company of Boeing that produces civil aircraft. The invitation card said that they want to invite Jiang Hai to participate in a test flight. In fact, they knew that Jiang Hai wants to buy a plane, so they wanted to befriend him. The test flight was scheduled in a week. Jiang Hai just smiled. Anyway, he wants to buy a plane, and he can just go and have a look. The test flight was held at Boeing's headquarters, Chicago. Jiang Hai can also go there directly. There are direct flights to Chicago from the capital, and Jiang Hai can change his flight. After confirming the invitation, Jiang Hai also called American Express to change his flight. After that, Jiang Hai started to have fun in Bing City. After learning that Jiang Hai will be leaving in a few days, his friends have been very cooperative with him. They have been hanging out with him every day. Except for the day when he went to Qi Li's house, Jiang Hai spent every day eating and drinking with his friends. They went to the movies, bowling, karaoke. Of course, this time it was vegetarian because he brought his family. Although the weather was cold, they still went to the riverside to have a barbecue. At the same time, Jiang Hai also experienced his fishing skills. He had to admit that although he had not fished for a long time, Jiang Hai's cooking skills had not deteriorated. Especially the fish food that was mixed with reiki. Almost every fish caught was a hit. Although the grilled fish had frozen Jiang Hai's friends to death, everyone was still very happy. Jiang Hai's friends were still very cold. One must know that at this time, the temperature in Ice City was only a few degrees Celsius. To be honest, a week passed quickly. After agreeing to come back during the spring festival, Jiang Hai was ready to return to the US. Although this time he came back in a hurry, Jiang Hai was very happy. He bought some dried sausages, roasted sausages and red sausages, and sent them back to Winthrop. Jiang Hai himself took a plane back to the capital. After spending a good night with Qi Li and Du Ning, Jiang Hai got on the plane to Chicago early the next morning. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai had his own small independent space. He watched a movie in it for a while. After feeling a little bored, he began to sleep. It was 10:10 a.m. when he took off. When he opened his eyes, it was 8 a.m. sharp. Yes, this was the time difference. After flying for 10 hours, he was still in the sky. However, it was daytime here. And it was also daytime in Chicago. Jiang Hai went to the bathroom he booked and took a shower. After that, he returned to his room and waited for the plane to land. Not long after, the plane landed smoothly at Chicago O'Hare International Airport amidst a tremor. After connecting to the covered bridge, Jiang Hai and the other VIPs got off the plane first. As soon as Jiang Hai walked out of the hall, he saw a woman in a black suit from a distance. She was in the airport's reception hall, holding a sign with Jiang Hai's Chinese written on it. At this time, she lowered her head and seemed to be searching for flight information on her mobile phone. Jiang Hai looked around. She might be here to pick him up, although he was not sure if someone was here to pick him up. "Hello, are you here to pick up Jiang Hai?" Walking over, Jiang Hai asked the woman. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman also raised her head. After seeing Jiang Hai, she nodded excitedly. "Yeah, it's you, Jiang. Hello, I have your photo. I was specially arranged by American Express to pick you up. My name is Audiobook. Don't you think my voice is familiar? I'm your American Express operator." Seeing Jiang Hai come over, the woman immediately said excitedly. Hearing her say this, Jiang Hai associated the voice on the other side of the phone. In fact, when Jiang Hai first got the Centurion Black Gold card, he also fantasized about who the woman on the other side of the phone was. But considering that a sweet voice did not necessarily mean that she was beautiful, this could be proven by countless voice actors. So over time, Jiang Hai gave up on fantasizing. Plus, there were many women around him, so there was no need to fantasize. But now it seems that this girl is really good. She is a typical American girl. Her long blonde hair is tied behind her head. She is about 1.75 meters tall. Of course, probably because she is wearing high heels, her feet look about 1.60 meters tall. She is a little petite. She has big blue eyes, a sharp chin, and some small freckles on her face, which makes her look young. She is a little thin and not too plump. But overall, she is a beauty. Jiang Hai is not interested in her. But after all, it is also a very happy thing to be with a beautiful woman. "Hello, Miss Bach." Hearing her rapid voice, Jiang Hai also smiled and stretched out his hand. "Hello." Maybe she also felt that her appearance was a little unladylike. Audiobook also stuck out her tongue a little embarrassedly, and then gently shook hands with Jiang Hai. "My car is outside. Your itinerary here has been arranged by Boeing. Let me help you carry your things." After shaking hands, Audiobook calmed down a little. She smiled and wanted to take Jiang Hai's backpack, but Jiang Hai stepped back and let go of her hand. "I'll carry it. This is not what a gentleman should do." Smiling at Audiobook, Jiang Hai said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai say so, Audrey Bach also nodded with a smile, and then took Jiang Hai outside the airport. Chicago also belongs to the north of the eastern United States. The weather is a little cold now. As soon as they left the departure hall, Audrey Bach shivered. But for Jiang Hai, this kind of temperature didn't matter. He tightened his backpack and followed the little beauty in front of him. They got into a red Beetle and sat in the passenger seat. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to sit in such a car. Because it was a little small, Jiang Hai was nearly 2 meters tall. It was okay to sit in an SUV, but to sit in such a car make do. In fact, the interior space of this car was very large, but Jiang Hai felt that it was a little small when he sat in it. But Audrey Bach didn't feel it. After sitting in the car, she started the engine and went to the center of Chicago. While driving, she was talking to Jiang Hai. It seems that she really likes to talk. Listening to her talking, Jiang Hai was a little sleepy. Fortunately, the scenery of Chicago was different from that of Boston, so Jiang Hai was not bored looking at the street scenery. "Mr. Jiang, do you know? You are my savior, my idol." Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't reply, Audrey Bach suddenly said to Jiang Hai seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned. "Oh, what do you mean?" Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. "It seems that they have met for the first time. When I first entered the American Express Company, I was an intern. After a year of internship, I had the opportunity to connect with you. To be honest, no one was willing to connect with you, because your information wasn't a secret. You didn't have any net worth, and only had a total of 300 million or so. But you bought a manor for 280 million. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Audrey Bach began to recall her past, making Jiang Hai feel a bit embarrassed. "That's right, Audrey Bach." Audrey Bach began to recall her past, making Jiang Hai a bit embarrassed. Chapter 863. In the beginning, he was indeed quite stupid. He didn't even know that he was crazy to spend 280 million on such a crappy place. If he went to New Mexico, 280 million would be enough to cover half of New Mexico. Of course, this was a joke. But at least the territory would be 5 times bigger than it is now. New Mexico, Florida, Miami, and so on. These southern states have a lot of empty land. And because they are places of immigration, naturally, there is no racial discrimination or anything like that. If he went there, Jiang Hai would even be a local tyrant. Of course, he was also a local tyrant here. But at that time, his brain was indeed a little too big. No wonder American Express didn't think highly of him. In 1 year, you went from $300 million to more than $1 billion. After another year, more than $1 billion became more than $3 billion. Now it's almost $5 billion. Oh, by the way, your cash now is about $4 billion. You just bought a company in Huaxia. I almost forgot. Seeing that Jiang Hai was listening to her, Audrey Bach also said excitedly, "Our salary and performance are related to our clients. I originally thought that with you, I would have no hope of buying a house or a car for the rest of my life. But I didn't expect that in just 3 years, I would be able to buy a house in New York. I just changed my car last month. It's all thanks to you. That's why I said that you are my savior and my idol. If you have any requests, you can come to me. I can help you solve all your problems. I can solve all your problems." Looking at Jiang Hai, Audrey Bach also said excitedly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai just chuckled and didn't say anything. Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. He naturally understood that this girl's words meant to solve all his problems. But at present, he wouldn't go berserk so easily with a woman wearing clothes. In a situation where he didn't go berserk, his self-control was still quite strong. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't respond, Audrey Bach also felt a little awkward. However, she didn't care. Instead, she introduced the situation in Chicago to Jiang Hai. Speaking of Chicago, the first thing that came to everyone's mind was probably the Chicago Bulls. This was different from whether one liked basketball or not. The Chicago Bulls were the first to be promoted by the NBA. With Jordan, these two brands had become the symbols of the NBA. Even people who did not watch the NBA would have heard of these two names. This was the power of David Stern. However, those who knew the United States would know that Chicago was not a good place to live. Chicago was the third largest metropolitan area in the United States, second only to New York and Los Angeles. However, compared to New York and Los Angeles, Chicago was far behind. For decades, Chicago was ruled by the Gray Gang. Unlike New York and Los Angeles, New York was the largest city in the United States. Even if it was for the benefit of their own country, they would not allow Gray Gang to continue growing. On the other hand, Los Angeles was the largest tourist city in the United States. In order to give foreigners a good impression of the U.S., these two places had to be thoroughly cleaned. On the other hand, Chicago was never cleaned up. In the 1990s, Gray Gang was still running rampant in the world. Although it was not as chaotic now, Chicago's economic status was slowly being shaken. At the same time, Chicago was not a suitable place for humans to live. It was nicknamed the Windy City because the wind was very strong. In winter, the cold wind from Lake Michigan could make the temperature drop to -30 degrees Celsius or more. In the summer, because of the refraction of the sun from the lake, the temperature could reach -40 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was huge. Therefore, it was necessary for people to prepare more clothes. To be honest, there were almost no tourist attractions in Chicago. The only famous attractions were a few buildings. The Willis Building, also known as the Sears Building, was actually just one building. In addition, there was also the Navy Pier, Lincoln Park, Grant Park. Just by listening to these names, one would know that there was no meaning in going there. Perhaps in Jiang Hai's opinion, the only thing to do in Chicago was to go and watch the Bulls play. However, the problem now was that the Bulls were also a mediocre team. It was not easy for them to attract an audience. Under Audrey Bach's introduction, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the hotel specially prepared for them by Boeing. This time, the invitation to the test flight was not only sent to Jiang Hai alone, there were also a few other people who received it. In order to match the identity of these people, Boeing prepared suites that were second only to the presidential suite. After receiving the room card, Audrey Bach also took Jiang Hai to the room. "Call me if you need anything. My room door is not locked." Before entering her small room, Audrey Bach deliberately said this to Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai also smiled. "Is there a need to remind me so blatantly?" Shaking his head, Jiang Hai walked into his room. As far as he is concerned, he doesn't intend to flirt outside. The most important thing was that he did not think that Audrey Bach was a good person to mess with. Time always passed quickly. In the afternoon, after a while of surfing the internet and watching TV in the room, it was evening. After Jiang Hai and Audrey Bach had dinner together, Jiang Hai went back to rest. Looking at Jiang Hai's closed door, Audrey Bach couldn't help but feel helpless. She looked at herself in the mirror. I shouldn't be bad. In their line of work, it was normal for them to have some kind of relationship with their clients that no one knew about. So people did this because they wanted to keep their jobs and make more money. This was inevitable. If Jiang Hai said one day that he wanted to change customer service staff, then with his ability, she would have to leave. Pleasing Jiang Hai was also something she should do, but in the current situation, Jiang Hai did not seem to have any interest in her. As for whether Jiang Hai was not interested in women, she knew that it was impossible. As far as she knew, Jiang Hai had many women in his home in Winthrop. From this, it could be seen that it was not that Jiang Hai was not interested in women, but he was simply not interested in her. However, since Jiang Hai was not interested, then she did not have to ask for a rebuff. This night, nothing happened. The next morning, Jiang Hai left his room refreshed, and then Audrey Bach drove him to the headquarters of Boeing. In the current world, there were plenty of rich people. Naturally, there were also people who bought planes. There were also plenty of aircraft companies. There were hundreds of companies like Cessna, Big Beach, Bombardier, Ernstrom, McDonnell Douglas, and even Honda. They sold private helicopters, multiple private helicopters, half-day fixed-wing aircraft, multi-day fixed-wing aircraft, corporate jets, and so on. There were even many companies in the country that sold aircraft. For example, in Jiang Hai's hometown Bing City, Heifei was a brand that sold airplanes and not cars. There were also companies like Imperial Capital Kiyuan, Shunfei China Airlines, Nandu Airlines, etc. But when it came to the top aircraft sellers, there were only two companies in the world. One was Airbus, and the other was Boeing. Boeing was an American company, and it was also the world's largest airline company. Almost all civil airliners used to be Boeing's customers. But after Airbus appeared in Europe, Boeing's monopoly was over. Now, most of China's airliners were owned by Airbus. But Boeing, the former giant, was still very popular. Originally, the Boeing company was based in Seattle, Washington in 2001, but for some reason, large enterprises and the like all fled Seattle after the new century. Just like the supersonic team had also left Seattle, Boeing also left Seattle and appeared in Chicago. Today, Jiang Hai went to Boeing's headquarters in Chicago. After alighting from the car, someone led them to a VIP lounge. There were already some people waiting there. These people had the intention and ability to buy planes. Most of them were above 40 years old. When Jiang Hai walked in, many people looked at him. Although some of them were curious about Jiang Hai's age, some of them were well-informed and knew who Jiang Hai was. Although they did not do business with him, there was no need to treat him as an enemy. When everyone was minding their own business, the staff who led Jiang Hai into the lounge gave Jiang Hai an iPad with the information of the airliners on display. Jiang Hai took the iPad and looked at it. This time, the airliners were not airliners but commercial airliners. They were divided into two categories. One was the BBJ series, and the other was the VIP series. There were a total of 6 airliners. But whether it was in terms of performance or the number of passengers, they were all different. The first aircraft to be displayed was the BBJ series. After Jiang Hai briefly looked at the 6 aircraft models, the staff came over and led Jiang Hai and the others to the runway. If you want to buy an aircraft, you naturally have to sit on it and try it out. They first sat in the basic type of BBJ plane, the BBJ model. Walking in front of the plane, Jiang Hai found that although the plane can only seat 19 people, excluding the pilot and co-pilot, the size of the plane is really not small. Chapter 864. The next test flight is the basic model of our BBJ commercial jet. Under the guidance of a stewardess, Jiang Hai and the others boarded the plane. After entering, Jiang Hai also looked at the plane. This plane was the basic model of the BBJ series. The interior decoration was not very good, but it was not bad either. It was not like ordinary civil aircraft. After all, this was a private plane. The seats were very spacious, just like the first-class business cabins of international flights, not the top first-class cabins. There was a big sofa that could be put down. Everyone had their own space. It did not look crowded. Of course, if you wanted to modify the plane after buying it, it was the buyer's problem. You could directly put a bed here, and no one would care. This was your freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, this basic BBJ aircraft is developed from the 737 to 700 aircraft. It has a range of 11,551 kilometers, a maximum speed of 18 kilometers per hour, and an altitude of 12,496 m. This data was naturally the best when it was tested in 1998. The total length of the aircraft is 33.6 m, the width is 35.7 m, and the height is 12.6 m. The length of the cabin is 24.1 m, the width is 3.54 m, and the height is 2 m. The maximum takeoff weight is 7 tons, and the empty weight is 3.25 tons. Some people will ask, you have already introduced the BBJ-2 and the BBJ-3. Why do you want to introduce the basic BBJ to us first? Let me explain it here. Seeing that everyone was looking at her, the stewardess began to explain. It seemed that she often did this kind of explanation. She was very familiar with it. The stability of this plane has been tested for nearly 20 years. Therefore, friends who like safety, for you this plane is a very good product. The most important thing is that this plane is also very cheap. Compared with the several planes we will introduce later, this one should be the cheapest. At present, the price of the existing plane is 67 $5 million, and the reserve plane starts at $65 million. Of course, the price of the decoration is different, so is the price. The stewardess smiled as she touched the plane beside her. Hearing the stewardess' words, Jiang Hai looked around. He had a passenger plane. Of course, it was a second-hand one. As long as it could fly, it was fine. Anyway, he did not expect to earn money from civil aviation, because the Tunglong company needed to transport beef. Those passenger planes cost Jiang Hai about $300 million. But the worst commercial plane costs more than $60 million. And most importantly, Jiang Hai could not buy it. First, the journey of this plane was not enough. Jiang Hai flew from the United States to Huaxia, a total of more than 15,000 kilometers. But this plane could only fly 11,000 kilometers, which was too little. There were too few people who could sit. Jiang Hai's family was too big. He Chili Chijia, Chia Ma Yinshan Ai Xiaoxi, Aphrodite Dana, Hilda Becky Sheila Asheria Bridget Janice Dalian Amarian Azalina Raylise Wallace, Biliac Valentina Galena, Al and Duran. There were 24 people. This plane could only seat 19 people, including the captain. It was too small. Jiang Hai casually glanced at the BBJ-2 and BBJ-3 in the back. He could not help but shake his head. The BBJ-2 was also a 2+19, and it could only cruise for 10,000 kilometers. It was too little. Even though it was a 2+21, it could only cruise for 10,000 kilometers. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai looked at the situation of the 3 planes behind him. Boeing had a total of 6 planes on display today. The first was the BBJ series of commercial planes, and there were 3 different planes behind. They were the Boeing 787 VIP, the Boeing 777 VIP, and the Boeing 747-8 VIP. But the prices of these 3 planes were quite impressive. The cheapest Boeing 787 was sold for $240 million. Looking at this price, Jiang Hai's heart skipped a beat. But even so, this plane could seat 45 people. It was enough, but the range was only 15,200 kilometers. In other words, if he wanted to fly from New York to the imperial capital, he was still more than 100 kilometers away. The 787 would not work. The 777 and 787 were similar, with a range of only 15,000 kilometers. The only plane that Jiang Hai could buy here was the Boeing 747-8 VIP. There were 2 good news about this plane. One was that it was big enough. It had a total of 4,700 square feet, could seat up to 150 people, and had a range of more than 17,000 kilometers. It perfectly satisfied Jiang Hai's desire to fly from Winthrop to Huaxia. So even though there were 6 planes now, Jiang Hai could only buy this one. But the bad news was that this plane was sold for $270 million. But compared to the $240 million of the 787, Jiang Hai was not short of $30 million. After the test flight of the basic BBJ aircraft was over, Jiang Hai went to the staff here and told them that he didn't need to test the next 4 aircraft because he couldn't buy them. If he wanted to buy one, he could only buy the 747-8. After hearing Jiang Hai's request, the eyes of the Boeing staff here lit up. It must be known that this was the most expensive plane sold at the moment. Now that Jiang Hai wanted to buy this plane, they couldn't help but be excited. They immediately arranged a test flight for Jiang Hai. In the whole big plane, there were only 3 people: Jiang Hai, Audrey Bach, and the guide. Jiang Hai also walked back and forth on the plane. He had to admit that this private plane was more like it. After getting off the plane, Jiang Hai directly decided to buy this plane. This plane cost $25.8 million. Jiang Hai renovated it according to the $22 million, making $28 million. There was a separate big bathroom with a big bathtub for bathing, a big kitchen, a huge dining room, a wine cabinet, a game room, and 20 separate rooms. Each room had its own bathroom, TV, bed, and everything else. There was also a huge reception room with some chairs for sitting and chatting when the plane landed. Anyway, the interior of this plane had everything that should and shouldn't have. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, this plane could sit at most 40 to 50 people. There was space for 150 people. 40 to 50 people. Wouldn't it be fine to play with it? Although Jiang Hai had a lot of designs, they were all very simple. He wasn't a designer himself. Things were fine as long as they were practical. There was no need to make them too gorgeous. For example, Jiang Hai didn't have any of those beautiful suspended ceilings. He just had the simplest suspended ceilings with a layer of wallpaper. That was all. That was enough. After all, this was Boeing's headquarters. After Jiang Hai finished talking about the design and looked at the concept drawings, the people here told Jiang Hai that this plane was very easy to renovate. There was an existing plane now, and the renovation could be completed in less than a month. Jiang Hai first paid 30% of the deposit. 30% of $280 million was $84 million. Jiang Hai didn't even hesitate and directly swiped his card to buy the plane. The remaining 70% would be paid after the plane was delivered. After buying the plane, Jiang Hai stayed in Chicago for another night, but nothing happened that night. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai took the plane back to Boston, leaving behind a helpless Audrey Bach. She really wanted to do something with Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, they didn't even hold hands. However, Jiang Hai also told her that unless she did something that threatened him, Jiang Hai was still very willing to use her as a telephone operator. Although she was a little unhappy that she didn't have a relationship beyond friendship with Jiang Hai, she was temporarily relieved after getting Jiang Hai's promise. The main reason why Jiang Hai was in such a hurry to return to Boston was mainly because of one reason. The state government had agreed to the proposal of Jiang Hai and Winthrop Mayor Wallace. They were willing to try to organize tourists from Huaxia to go into the mountains to hunt. But there was one thing. They had to sign up, and they had to be supervised and accompanied by them before they could go into the mountains to hunt. At the same time, some protected species in the mountains had to be written in a report. They couldn't just kill any animal. Jiang Hai didn't expect the Massachusetts state government to agree so quickly. Although the American government wasn't as slow as the Huaxia, they were all civil servants after all. These things were public affairs, so they naturally didn't care so much. They were all fixed salaries. Although it wasn't a secure job, the income wasn't very high, so these people didn't have much passion when doing things. All crows were black in the world. Whether it was in the United States or Huaxia, they all had the same idea. So Jiang Hai was originally prepared to wait for the news for 2 weeks. It might take another 3 weeks. However, he didn't expect that he would receive a reply in 10 days. This made Jiang Hai somewhat unprepared. Jiang Hai, who originally wanted to hang around in Chicago for 2 days, rushed back to Boston after buying the plane and sleeping. After getting off the plane at the Boston airport, Jiang Hai saw Moses Adams, who hadn't appeared for a long time. This black lawyer used to be just a small lawyer. Now, with Jiang Hai's help, his department had a big reputation in the eastern United States. He helped Jiang Hai with the execution and operation of several mergers and acquisitions of other companies. He helped Jiang Hai to contact forage buyers all over the world. Just these 2 major operations made Moses Adams' name spread to New York. He used to be a second-rate lawyer for many years. Although he was capable, he was at most a second-rate lawyer in Boston. He might not even be a third-rate lawyer in New York. This made him very unwilling, so he often went to New York for business. But now it was different. With Jiang Hai's work, Moses Adams' reputation had risen. He was already at the level of Boston's top lawyer. In New York, he could be regarded as the top lawyer. He was only a little away from the top. For this, he was quite grateful to Jiang Hai. Without Jiang Hai, he wouldn't be where he was today. Chapter 865. The American government was actually very poor. They were really poor. They were not crying about being poor. Unlike some county governments, they were always crying that they were poor. In the end, the county government would drive Audi, Land Rover, and so on. They were so overbearing that they were too embarrassed to greet their colleagues. These so-called poor areas were just deceiving ghosts. Perhaps the commoners were really poor. But as for the government officials, hee. The 1 meter higher sky was not an undeserved reputation. Being an official for thousands of miles was actually the truth. However, compared to this situation, the American government really did not have much money. This was not an act. It was true. During the financial crisis, any department in the country could be said to be completely fine. However, the American government went bankrupt one after another, including the familiar White House, California, and so on. This was because the American government really did not have much money to speak of. The American government's finances might be a little watery, but the finances of the states and counties were completely transparent. It was really transparent, so transparent that it made people speechless. Moreover, there were some people like old men and old women who surrounded the state government all day long to calculate these things. If a manhole cover cost more than a few dozen dollars, they would raise their flags in protest. In addition, the governors of the states and counties were elected. There were different parties keeping an eye on them. To be honest, being an official or a civil servant in the United States was not something that people would be willing to do. How much did the state government spend on education every year? Generally speaking, it was 6% of the total income. The highway maintenance cost was 2%. Public welfare took up 6%. Natural resources took up 2%. The police took up 11%. Prisons took up 19%. Drainage took up 9%. Fire and other expenses were calculated separately. Of course, this was only a rough estimate. The situation in every state was different, but it was indeed very transparent. Every single cent was spent on the right place. And to be honest, the salary of these civil servants was actually not that much. Basically, the salary of civil servants at the bottom was about $36,000 per year. It was not even $40,000 per year. The police, on the other hand, were paid more. The salary of middle-level managers was only about $70,000 per year. The governor's salary was between $100,000 and $200,000. Different states had different amounts of money. The governor of California only had a salary of $200,000 per year, not to mention the governor of Massachusetts. Everyone wanted to be an official, but to be honest, if one had no ambition and no power, Jiang Hai felt that being an official in the United States was not a good thing. Even a random civilian in America would dare to point at the governor's nose and scold him for not doing a good job. If this happened in China, what did it mean to be single and not fight for power in the country? It didn't matter if you were rich on the surface or a ruthless person on the surface. Not fighting for power meant that as long as you were a small official at the yamen, if you were to make an enemy of him, he could destroy your family. Of course, there was no yamen now, but the meaning was similar. Unless you had tens of billions of yuan and found protection from the higher-ups. Otherwise, a department head or section chief would be enough to ruin your family. This was the difference between an official position and a gold standard. In America, these government officials had to curry favor with the rich. Because they were going to be elected, they had to garner votes. Even if it was just for show, they had to do charity work. His money was being targeted, so he needed some political donations. And where did all this money come from? Of course, it came from the pockets of the rich. It was that simple. This was also why Jiang Hai was so rich that he was the local tyrant in Winthrop, even though he did not support any faction. These people were counting on him to pay taxes, so that they could pay their salaries. Everything was calculated by percentages, and not fixed salaries. The difference between Jiang Hai paying a few $100 million in taxes and not paying a few $100 million in taxes was like heaven and earth. It could be said that from the governor to the county magistrate, the police, the fire department, the retirees, and even the unemployed on the streets, Jiang Hai's money was also included in the unemployment compensation. How could they not curry favor with Jiang Hai? And this time, Jiang Hai was looking for the Massachusetts government to discuss the matter of letting the tourists go hunting. After this matter was reported, it seemed like it passed a hurdle every day. On the first day, Boston agreed to hand it over to the state government without hesitation. On the second day, the state government agreed and sent it back to Boston. On the third day, Boston re-examined it and agreed. On the fourth day, Moses Adams was notified to come over to discuss this matter. It seemed like they were more anxious than Jiang Hai. It was understandable. The hunting season in the Appalachian Mountains was only this period of the year. When the heavy snow sealed the mountains, they would not be able to enter because it would be dangerous to enter, and the prey could only be hunted now. Summer was too hot, and there were too many poisonous insects and snakes. Spring was the season for animals to give birth, so naturally, they had to be protected. At this time, autumn was almost over, so they agreed to this matter that could increase the state government's income. Moreover, they only needed to find some instructors and supervision. For them, this was all fine. Under such circumstances, the two sides hit it off. After Jiang Hai got off the plane in Boston, Moses Adams took him directly to the state government. In the car, he had already told Jiang Hai that the specific implementation and negotiations were almost done. The whole tourist hunt was divided into 3 parts: registration, training, and hunting. Registration was easy. Originally, Mayor Wallace's idea was to pay each person $200. Entering the mountains to shoot a bullet would be $2, and guns would be free, just like a gun shop. However, after Jiang Hai heard this, he directly changed the $200 to $2,000. Jiang Hai was well aware of his countrymen's situation. He wasn't a black American, but because $200 wasn't a lot of money, it was only a little more than 1,200 yuan when converted to RMB. It could be said that not many people in his country cared about this amount of money, but $2,000 was different. This was more than $12,000. Of course, this was the deposit for registration, not the real money. If they broke the rules or something, the money would be deducted. If they did not break the rules, then only the basic money would be charged. One bullet was still $2, but Jiang Hai took away the gun for free. After all, this was not a shooting range, and maintenance could be done in a short time. It was inevitable that they would bump into things in the mountains. If it was broken, it would not look good for either side. The guns were divided into 3 grades: hunting rifle, shotgun, and semi-automatic rifle. The hunting rifle was $50, and the shotgun was $100, and the semi-automatic rifle was $100. There were no fully automatic rifles. Usually, when they went to sleep at night, the guns would be taken away. It was impossible to stay in the mountains for only one day. Naturally, the guns would be taken away at night by the people on guard duty. Of course, these guns were provided by Winthrop, which was Jiang Hai's gun shop. The income had nothing to do with the state government. In addition, there were local clothes and so on, which had nothing to do with the state government. These were all things that Jiang Hai and the others wanted to earn. Of course, taxes were another matter. Taxes were inevitable in the United States. The state government and Winthrop talked about money mainly in 2 aspects. One was the registration fee. Of course, it was not the deposit, but the registration fee. Jiang Hai did not plan to take these people hunting for no reason. If they went hunting, it would not be a hunting trip but an outing. Therefore, only the men could go hunting. Each person had to pay $100, which was the fee for entering the mountains. At the same time, they had to pay $50. $20 was for insurance, and $30 was for the instructor in training. Jiang Hai and the others mainly talked about the $130. The state government's intention was that Winthrop would provide the site, the hunting license, and the personnel would also be provided by the state government. They wanted 80% of the money, but Mayor Wallace only gave 60%. Now, he wanted Jiang Hai to come over and discuss this matter with him. In fact, in Jiang Hai's opinion, 80 to 60% of the money was actually not much. 80% was only $104 per person. To Jiang Hai, this was just a small amount of money. In Jiang Hai's opinion, they would definitely have to play with guns in the mountains. 200 bullets would be considered a small amount. This was $400. If they hunted small animals, they could directly bring them back. If they killed big animals, they could eat them on the spot for free. But if they killed deer or something like that, they would definitely make it into art and bring it back to China. The processing fee was calculated based on the deer. $100 per deer was considered a small amount, so this was $500. In addition to the clothes, Jiang Hai specially bought a batch of military equipment. There were camouflage uniforms, helmets, military boots, canteens, tactical vests, tactical backpacks, and so on. If they were going to play in the mountains, they would definitely need a set. This set was not expensive, only $300. It was less than 2,000 RMB. Was it expensive? Of course not. In China, even 2,000 RMB for a set of camouflage uniforms might not be enough to buy it. This added up to $800. After deducting the cost, Jiang Hai earned at least $600 per person just by bringing these people into the mountains. 10 people would be 6,000, and 100 people would be 60,000. Winthrop now had about 3,000 domestic tourists per month. Each group had 50 to 60 people. If they sent out 2 groups a day, 1/3 of the people would go. That would be a net income of $600,000. That would be $7,200,000 a year. Although this was just a small amount for Jiang Hai, this money was more for him to stabilize the region. With this income, not only the county, but also the state government would probably be more grateful to him. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. In his mind, he had already figured out this account. After a while, he would go to the state government. Naturally, he would be the most suitable person. This small amount of money, he really didn't care too much. Chapter 866. Have you heard? Winthrop allows us to hunt in the mountains. In the Cowboy Song Bar in Winthrop, 2 middle-aged men were sitting there, drinking beer and listening to country music. On the stage in front of them, there were some impromptu dancers. The whole restaurant was quite comfortable. People who were used to the pressure of urban life could relax here. Even some middle-aged people who came here for fun were willing to sit here at night before going back to rest. To be honest, their days here were like a dream to these people. It was really comfortable, because they didn't need to rush to places or go to scenic spots. Their life in the small town was really timid to the extreme. Of course, those who came for scenic spots and photos would not come to Winthrop for fun. Ordinary tourists had to get up at 3 in the morning if they wanted to go out to sea. If they didn't want to go out to sea, they could sleep as long as they wanted in the morning. Except for Jiang Hai's seaside villa, the other hotels, whether they were private or public, had kitchens to provide breakfast. In the morning, they could walk around the town and breathe in the fresh air. They could also walk around the beach or go to the dock to buy some fresh seafood. Under Jiang Hai's control, the price of the seafood was at least 2/3 cheaper than in China. But the fishermen here didn't make a lot of money. A lobster that was more than 1 kilogram was sold for at least 200 yuan in China. But here, $20 was $30 for 2 kilograms. The big lobsters and crabs were all alive and huge. They didn't have the speed of small children at all. A crab was about 8 taels, but such big crabs were $8 a kilogram. Note it was 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram was about 50 yuan. The big lobsters were $5 a kilogram, which was more than 30 yuan per kilogram. All kinds of seafood were even cheaper. 90% of the cod in China was fake, but here they were all real. The price of the deep-sea cod was even cheaper than the river fish in China. 1 kilogram was about $1.50, which was about 10 yuan. Even so, the fishermen still made more than 30% more than what they sold to fishing companies. Therefore, for some foodies, this was heaven. The beef was ridiculously cheap, and the quality was good. In China, steak had to be eaten with pasta. Because it was not enough, here, they could eat as much as they wanted at the same price. Of course, they didn't eat the beef in Jiang Hai's manner, but ordinary beef. But that was enough. Zhang Dihai saw the business opportunity here. So he specially asked Jiang Hai to rent a shop in the small town to sell goods from Huaxia. Among other things, the seasonings were quite popular. It could be said that as long as one came to Winthrop to play, the food would not be bad. 99 out of 100 people had to be satisfied with the food to not ruin Winthrop's reputation. All kinds of expensive seafood sold in China were sold at half price, or even 1/3 of the price here. Beef that was popular in other countries was sold for only $5 here. Other than eating, there were also many people who came to play here. There were a lot of women walking around the town's commercial street every day. American clothes of good quality were cheaper than those sold in China. Famous brands had no tariffs and were much cheaper than those sold in China. These people bought cosmetics, computers, clothes, and even some food. After lunch, the men could go to the shooting range to play with guns in the afternoon. They could go to the racecourse to ride horses or swim at the beach. Everyone could also go to the orchards to pick vegetables, participate in the farms and ranches, and order fresh milk the next morning. It could be said that for a place to rest and recuperate, Winthrop's reputation in China was not ordinary. It was the off-season now. Because winter was coming, the flow of people decreased. However, there were still about 100 people coming to Winthrop every day. If it was summer, during the summer holidays in China, the flow of people here would be considered small if it doubled. Winthrop was so good, so the businesses in the small town were also very good. The business of the two oldest bars in the town was extraordinarily good. Cowboy Song and Sea Warrior targeted different customers, but they both made a lot of money. Compared to the first time Jiang Hai came to Cowboy Song, the decoration here was much better than the last time Jiang Hai came here. In the past, when Jiang Hai and the others came here, there was nothing but 2 billiards cases. After all, the cowboys who came here didn't like to play billiards. But now there were 4 billiard tables. There were also some darts in the distance, and there was a counting device next to them. Big sofas and good seats were available here. At the same time, there were many Huaxia students walking around in the crowd as waiters. Directly opposite the bar, there was a stage. Old Tony had specially invited a country band to perform here every night from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. It brought a different feeling to this small bar. Of course I've heard about it. You know, the family I live in is a hunter. As I said, this place relies on tourism to make money. How could they give up such a good project? After taking a sip of the dark beer in front of him, a middle-aged man opposite the man, who had just spoken, said with slight disdain, "You don't know, I came here last year. At that time, there was a deer disaster here. I saw the townspeople here carrying guns and cannons to kill deer outside. I was so excited. At that time, I said I wanted to go with them, but those Americans were not at ease with letting us carry weapons. They were probably afraid that we would cause a revolution here." Seeing that he had attracted everyone's attention, the middle-aged fat man said with a smile. Hearing his words, the people around him laughed. "Finally, we can go into the mountains. I must sign up tomorrow." After hearing his words, the man who had just spoken clenched his fist. To be honest, Winthrop was fun, delicious, and nice to live in, but it lacked some exciting activities. Because there was no scenery underwater, and the seabed was very deep, Winthrop did not encourage diving, and it was not suitable for diving. Therefore, there was nothing fun for people who were looking for excitement here. But this time was different. They could go into the mountains, and there were many military enthusiasts who were eager to go. "Hey, I heard that this time, those Americans are going to train or something. It won't be so easy to go." Hearing his words, the fat man couldn't help but laugh. He didn't seem to care. "Old Zhang, don't be sarcastic. Aren't you going tomorrow?" Looking at his expression, the person who insisted on going just now couldn't help but look at him with contempt, then laughed and said, "How can I not go?" Hearing his words, old Zhang immediately said, looking at his anxious look, everyone couldn't help but laugh. There were definitely a lot of people who were going to sign up tomorrow. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai slowly woke up from his sleep. He hadn't woken up so early in a while, but today's matter was more or less related to him, so it wouldn't be good if he didn't show up. Jiang Hai removed Qi Jie's arm from his waist and slowly landed on the ground. He glanced at the time. It was 6:30 in the morning. It was about time to pack up and set off. Jiang Hai returned to Winthrop 4 days ago. Because he didn't leave for long this time, Qi Jie and the others didn't feel like newlyweds. After staying at home for a few days, Jiang Hai also received news from Mayor Wallace. The details have already been discussed with the state government. After everything was made clear, Winthrop's hunting trip was also prepared to begin today. Originally, they had been in a deadlock over the division of profits, but after Jiang Hai told them about the real way to make money, Mayor Wallace also retreated, letting the state government take 80% of the profits. They also didn't care about 20%, because the real money came from the surrounding areas. After confirming this big issue, it was easy to discuss the rest, but Jiang Hai didn't have to come here. In 3 days, Winthrop specially emptied a police training ground, and the state government also sent the first batch of instructors. Maybe it was to tell Winthrop that they weren't slacking off, but the first batch of instructors were all retired military officers. They weren't ordinary police officers, but they were all from the front line. It wasn't clear if they had killed anyone, but at least their psychological state was quite good. They must have seen blood before. If anything happened in the mountains, they would be able to handle it. These police officers were actually very willing to come, because it was considered a business trip at public expense, and they would still receive their salary. At the same time, the state government also gave them a share of the profits. Leading a team into the mountains, including the early training, could earn them about $1,000 in 5 to 6 days. How could there be such a good business? Therefore, there were many people who wanted to come. But after all, it was just the beginning. So the state government chose people who were very experienced. As the middleman of this incident, Jiang Hai naturally had to follow the first batch of people. After getting out of bed, Jiang Hai went to the bathroom to wash up, then went downstairs. After breakfast, Jiang Hai found that Belle had been waiting for a long time. "You're here so early. There's still time. Do you want to eat breakfast?" Looking at Belle, Jiang Hai realized that he hadn't played with Bei Lu for quite some time. Looking at him now, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel nostalgic. "No, boss, this is an opportunity to make some extra money. I won't let it go." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle chuckled and said. Hearing him say this, Jiang Hai also smiled and sped up his eating speed. Then he activated his shield and went to Winthrop's training ground with him. Chapter 867. Jiang, you're finally here. Driving, Jiang Hai arrived at the police training ground around 8:30 a.m. But at this time, there were already a lot of people gathered there. Mayor Wallace of Winthrop was also there. After all, this was the first hunting team, so he had to keep a close eye on them. Beside him stood several people in military uniforms. "Hey, didn't we meet at 9 o'clock? Oh my god, you guys are too excited." After parking the car, Jiang Hai got out of the car. After greeting Mayor Wallace, he looked at the soldier on the other side. I don't remember the state government saying that they would send soldiers here." Looking at the man, Jiang Hai said with some confusion. "Yes, Mr. Jiang. I am indeed just a policeman, but I think this uniform is better for training these people." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man in the military uniform couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, because this person actually spoke Mandarin with perfect pronunciation, and his pronunciation was quite standard, even better than Jiang Hai's. After all, Jiang Hai's speech was more or less northeastern, but this person spoke quite well. "Jiang Hai, you speak Mandarin?" Shaking hands, Jiang Hai also introduced himself, although he felt that this person should know him. "I know you, Mr. Jiang. My name is Roga Decat. I used to study in Huaxia. No, I stayed there for 4 years, so I know a little bit of Huaxia's Mandarin. My team, and I will be training these tourists." Hearing Jiang Hai introduce himself first, this person also said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded. "Can you explain in detail the training content?" After getting to know each other, Jiang Hai followed them to the training ground inside. Jiang Hai was still very curious about these people's training methods. "We currently have 5 days in the mountain. On the first day, we will show them how to shoot, and then teach them how to shoot. On the second day, we will do some basic physical training. On the third day, we will train to distinguish the dangers in the forest. On the fourth day, we will leave in the morning. After staying overnight, we will return at noon on the 5th day." After all, this person was not really training policemen or soldiers, so the arrangement was very simple. After hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but secretly nod. In the United States, it was the first time that tourists from Huaxia were allowed to go hunting, but it was common for them to organize hunts here. The only thing to pay attention to was diplomatic relations and safety issues. As for the classes, it was more or less the same. Very good, let's give it a try. Hearing Roga Descartes' words, Jiang Hai also nodded with satisfaction. Indeed, he had assigned them well. These 3 days of training could allow these people to sharpen their weapons and feel the Buddha's feet, so that they would not be stupid as soon as they entered the mountain. After receiving Jiang Hai's praise, this person also chuckled, and then led Jiang Hai into the training ground. As soon as he entered the training ground, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. He knew that there were about 3,800 tourists in Winthrop. After all, they had never been to the mountain before. Even if they wanted to go hunting, it would be good enough if there were 30 or 40 people. The rest would have to wait and see. However, when he walked into the training ground, he was shocked because at this time, there were at least 300 Chinese people on the training ground. These people gathered in groups of 3 or 5, chatting and chatting. Some middle-aged people even went to the smoking room to smoke. He didn't expect that there would be so many people who wanted to be the first to eat crabs. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little worried and asked Mayor Wallace, "So many people?" "Yes, there are so many people who signed up on the first day, and they all paid the security deposit in full." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace was happy and a little worried. He was happy because there were so many people, so the income must be very good. But he was worried because with so many people, it might not be so easy to manage. There are too many people. When we enter the mountain, let's divide into teams of 20 people. Glancing at so many people, Jiang Hai had to overturn his idea and said to Mayor Wallace, they had to study and divide the road into several entrances. This way, several teams could enter the mountain together. But that was a matter for the future. Fortunately, they still had 3 days to allocate the teams. It seemed that the people sent by the state government were far from enough. "Hey, Jiang Hai is here." Seeing Jiang Hai and the other 3 people walk in, many people pushed their friends next to them, and then pointed at Jiang Hai in the distance and said, none of them were unfamiliar with Jiang Hai. After all, it was impossible not to know about Jiang Hai in Winthrop. Jiang Hai, a Chinese person, had a higher status here than Mayor Wallace. Therefore, almost all the tourists knew about Jiang Hai and knew that this guy was rich. They also knew that this guy was definitely not someone to be trifled with. "Do you think we can get money if we kidnap him?" Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, a few young people laughed and said, these guys were rich second generations in China, but they were not the top ones. Of course, they were just joking. I advise you to give up on this idea. Don't joke around. I heard that Jiang Hai's strength is terrifying enough. Most importantly, do you see the person beside him? Everyone in the town knows him. That person is called Bell Lester. He's from the Triangle State. Hearing this person's words, the person next to him laughed disdainfully, and then pointed at Bell, who had been standing guard beside Jiang Hai. He was also the only bodyguard around Jiang Hai that everyone knew. Is the Triangle State very powerful? Hearing his words, the rich second generation said disdainfully, isn't the Triangle State very powerful? Hearing what he said, the other people looked at him and said, Tisk. Hearing these people's answers, the rich second generation couldn't help but snort. Just as he was about to say something, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked back and found that Jiang Hai was standing behind him, looking at him with a smile. Looking at Jiang Hai's smile, the rich second generation couldn't help but be shocked. Hee, I'm just making sure. Brother Jiang, do you smoke? Looking at Jiang Hai, the rich second generation smiled awkwardly, then took out a box of soft cigarettes from his pocket and asked Jiang Hai. Smoking is harmful to your health, but you have to gather. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said to him. Then they walked to the middle of the field. At this time, many people had gathered. About 10 minutes later, the rest of the people also came over. When they came over, they didn't stand, but just huddled together. Even in the eyes of the U.S. military, which is not strict with military discipline, these people are too lazy. Then I'll start. Although he was a little dissatisfied with the laziness of these tourists, after all, He was not here to train them to be soldiers, so Roka Decatur didn't care too much. After saying a few words to Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace, he walked to the front of the crowd. Everyone looked at the big man coming out and subconsciously stopped talking. Hello, soldiers. My name is Roka Decatur. From the next 3 days, I will be your instructor. I will teach you how to live in the forest, what you can and can't touch, and what you can and can't touch. I will not teach you the correct shooting posture. Otherwise, with the gun in your hands, you may be in more danger than if you don't have a gun. Looking at the people in front of him, Roka Decatur began to speak clearly. Hearing the familiar Mandarin, the people here were a little confused, but it was good that they could understand. Do we really have to train here for 3 days? In my opinion, just give us an M16 each, and we can go into the mountains for a round. Do we still need to train for hunting? After Roka Decatur finished speaking, someone had already started talking. For most of the tourists, going into the mountains to hunt was a very enjoyable thing. But they were not willing to learn here for 3 days. Facts had proven that most people were not willing to go back after leaving the school. Let me correct your 3 problems. First, you don't have an M16. You can only use shotguns, and old-fashioned rifles. Second, if I let you go into the mountains now, I estimate that at least 30% of you will not be able to come back alive. Third, in the future, please say that you are an instructor. If anyone still has such doubts, please don't say it out loud. If you don't follow these rules, you still have a chance to get your money back. After you start training, you won't have such benefits because other than the deposit, all other expenses will be deducted directly, Roka Decatur said seriously after listening to this person's words. Hearing this person's words, most of the tourists looked at each other, although they did not care about what Roka Decatur said. However, they also knew that it was better to learn more in these 3 days. There were still some people who were smiling mischievously. In their eyes, he had come here and spent money, and this was God. How could these people still want to train God? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai sighed. Why did he allow these people to go into the mountains in the first place? It must be a joke. It was not worth it to lose Winthrop's reputation for this little bit of money. Thinking of this, he could not help but look at Mayor Wallace. He wanted to see if he should directly stop this hunt. However, Mayor Wallace smiled and looked at Roka Decatur, who was still standing there. He believed that this man would have a way. After all, he had heard about this man's past. Chapter 868. I'm so tired. After returning to the lodging house, Zhao Zhan couldn't help but cry out. He didn't eat his favorite food, nor did he take a shower. He just lay on the bed and wanted to sleep. Looking at him, his wife couldn't help but walk over and look at him with some heartache. Zhao Zhan was already 55 years old this year. In China, he was considered a bit older than middle-aged people. Currently, he was working as an engineer in a state-run construction site. In their generation, engineers who had the qualifications to build a company were very popular. Even managers who were sent out to work would need a company's experience. And people like him who worked as an engineer in the head office naturally had a lot of benefits. For example, when he went down to patrol, the local authorities gave him offerings. And some suppliers who cooperated with the group gave him offerings. Giving gifts was also a microcosm of Huaxia civilization. It was an indispensable part. Zhao Zhan was a soldier when he was young, and he was a scout. In the era where there were no special forces, scouts were equivalent to special forces, so he had always liked guns and cannons. But after retiring, he didn't have the ability to get guns and cannons. Although he was rich now, he always felt that he lacked some of the vitality of a young man. Last year, he heard his old friend say how fun Winthrop was, and he was tempted. He had already come here once at the beginning of this year, and felt that it was really fun. The most important thing was that he could go to the shooting range to shoot. His shooting skills were still stuck at the time when he was a soldier. At that time, they were carrying a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. Compared to these guns now, was there a difference of just a little bit? Now these rifles were M16, M4 carbine, August, and even AK and Huaxia's 95. To Zhao Zhan, this was simply his heaven. After coming here, as long as he had nothing to do, he would go to the shooting range to play. Although it was quite interesting to shoot fixed targets all day long, it was a little boring after a long time. Therefore, when he learned that Winthrop had organized a group of rangers to hunt deer and wild boars in the mountains, he was very excited. When Jiang Hai was young, he helped his fellow villagers kill wild boars. At that time, wild boars weren't classified as second-class protected animals. They were harmful. At that time, the 4 pests referred to flies, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and rats. There was also a saying that the 3 pests referred to wild boars, sparrows, and rats. At that time, they killed a lot of them. Even when Jiang Hai was young, people often used bird nets to catch birds in the forest. After no one hunted them, sparrows were still abundant in the north, and wild boars were also rampant in the south. But even if it was rampant, ordinary people wouldn't be allowed to fight, right? Moreover, if ordinary people wanted to fight, what would they use to fight? Where was the gun? Zhao Zhan was also very excited at the thought of going hunting. He made an appointment with a few of his old buddies and went to sign up today. At first, they really didn't pay much attention to the foreigner, who could speak Huaxia. Just like his old friend said, they were consumers and consumers were God. But today, God was peeling off a layer of skin. At the beginning, the instructor named Luo Jia asked his people to demonstrate the physical fitness training they were going to do today. After all, these people were just tourists, so they didn't have the ability to climb mountains and jump seas. They mainly practiced 3 activities. First, cross-country running. They had to bend over and cross a forest. Second, standing shooting posture. Needless to say, this was needless to say. Third, squatting shooting posture. But just these 3 were enough to kill these people. Zhao Zhan was fine. After all, he had a strong desire to play. Moreover, he had been a soldier before, so he was able to endure it. However, his old buddies couldn't endure the first segment. They sat on the ground lazily and couldn't get up. The instructor didn't say anything. He directly called a few policemen over and carried this person onto a stretcher. Then they were sent out of the training field and sent to the hospital. After seeing the patient in the hospital and confirming that he was fine, he directly refunded the money to him. He told him that with his current physical fitness, he couldn't go into the mountains, so he wouldn't earn the money. At that time, the person was dumbfounded. He wanted to go back, but sorry, he couldn't. Indeed, consumers were God. But when the other party didn't earn your money, what kind of God were you? After hearing this news, many people who wanted to be lazy subconsciously shut their mouths. They came here to have fun in the mountains. In the end, they were chased out. Not only could they not go, but most importantly, they were embarrassed. Huaxia people cared most about their face. Losing face was more important than anything else. Many people had been telling themselves that they had endured the pain. However, even if the amount of training was very low, it had exhausted most of their physical strength. Like Zhao Zhan, there were many people who had gone home. Today, the business of the bars was much worse. Looking at her husband's appearance, Zhao Zhan's wife felt distressed and helpless. Look at how old you are. Why are you still acting tough? It's dangerous to go into the mountains. Otherwise, I don't think you should go in. Looking at Zhao Zhan, his wife massaged his sore arms and said, "It would be strange if he wasn't tired after carrying a gun for a whole day. No, it's not like you don't know how rare this opportunity is. We are going to the forest to hunt deer and wild boar. If we send these photos back, old Li and the others will be envious. I heard from little Jiang that if we hunt a deer, we can cut off its head. Then, he will let the Native Americans make it into a specimen for us. We can bring it back to China and display it in my study room. TSK, just thinking about it makes me crazy." When he heard his wife say that she was going to give up, Zhao Zhan, who was lying on the bed, suddenly became energetic. Then he said with a serious face, in the end, he even felt a little happy. "Then you go. It's a good opportunity for you to exercise." Hearing her old man's thoughts, Zhao Zhan's wife couldn't help but sigh. This guy, he is so fat and he wants to hunt deer? It's more likely that he will be beaten by deer. Hey, you don't understand. By the way, hurry up and buy me a set of camouflage clothes, a helmet, a tactical vest and military boots. Hearing his wife's words, Zhao Zhan also shook his head proudly. What does a woman know? But at this moment, he suddenly remembered something, and immediately asked his wife to buy it. Hearing what Zhao Zhan wanted to buy, his wife was stunned. Are you going hunting or going to war? Looking at Zhao Zhan, his wife couldn't help but ask, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hey, don't worry about that. Go, these Americans are lazy. It won't take long for them to close. Seeing that his wife didn't want to move, Zhao Zhan was also a little anxious and hurriedly said. Under Zhao Zhan's urging, his wife reluctantly left the house and borrowed the resident's bicycle and rode to the town. But when she arrived at the outdoor goods store in the town, she found that the outside of the store was full of people. There were young people and some middle-aged women like her. Seeing this, she couldn't help but be a little confused. After parking the bicycle, she saw a middle-aged woman she was familiar with and went over. Sister Lu, what are you doing? Looking at these people, Zhao Zhan's wife couldn't help but ask with some doubts. What else can we do? Buying clothes. Isn't it because of the trouble in the mountains? Hearing the words of Zhao Zhan's wife, Sister Lu couldn't help but sigh. Her husband also signed up to go hunting in the mountains like Zhao Zhan. After returning home today, he cried out in pain. But he didn't give up and forced her to come and buy clothes, which made her angry and amused. My husband is the same. By the way, why do we have to line up here to buy clothes? Listening to Sister Lu's words, Zhao Zhan's wife smiled helplessly, then looked at these people. Why are they lining up here to buy clothes? These are all here to buy clothes. You have to take the form that your old man signed up and go in to get a number. Then they will call the number and sell the clothes. Just as Sister Lu said, a young man took out a set of clothes with an excited face. This set of clothes was divided into several parts: a camouflage uniform, a helmet, a pair of military boots, a tactical vest, a canteen, and a belt for the legs. All of these things added together made for a serious pile of items. Young man, these are the things you want to buy? How much are they? Seeing the young man take out the things, Sister Lu couldn't help but stop him and ask him. Although these people who came here to play were not lacking in money, they were used to being careful, so it was better to ask. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man also stopped. Auntie, these are the things you want to buy. Guns, maps, magazines, bullets, and so on. They will be distributed when we enter the mountains. These things cost a total of $420. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man also said with a smile. So expensive, more than $400, equivalent to more than 2,000 yuan. Hearing the young man's words, Sister Qi couldn't help but secretly click her tongue. In fact, even Zhao Zhan's wife suddenly felt a little reluctant. Expensive? Auntie, you said it the other way round. These things are expensive? Haha. Auntie, look at this uniform. It's from the United States Marine Corps. The elbow and knee pads are sewn onto it. Not only is it wear-resistant, it's also very protective. Most importantly, it's not too hot to wear and breathes. Just this uniform alone is worth at least 3,000 yuan on some domestic military forums. The helmet, tactical vest, and military boots are all the most authentic military products. I just checked on the internet, and it's less than 8,000 yuan in the country. Don't even think about it. I just posted it online, and someone already offered 8,300 yuan to buy it. If it wasn't for the fact that one person is limited to one set, I really want to buy more. Hearing Sister Lu's words, the young man couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 869. This Luo Jia has some skills. Jiang Hai couldn't help but say to Belle, who was beside him, as he looked at the people on the field. He originally thought that these unruly people would cause some trouble, but now it seemed that the state government and Mayor Wallace had their reasons for believing in Luo Jia. This Luo Jia used to be a member of the Marine Corps. He participated in the war between Vietnam and Iraq. Because of a suicide attack in Iraq, half of the entire team died. He was a little discouraged, so he retired from the army and returned to Boston, where he became a police officer. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also said seriously, "Wow, there's such a thing. No wonder Mayor Wallace trusts him so much. When it came to the armed forces of the United States, the police department was the FBI and the CIA, and the military department was the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps. Even if Jiang Hai was not a military fan, he had heard of this before. To be able to enter the Marine Corps, this Luo Jia was not an ordinary person. It turned out that this guy really did have some skills. On the first day, Jiang Hai wanted to give up on the program, but after 3 days, there were only 240 people left. Nearly 60 people couldn't take it anymore and quit the training. However, these 240 people were much more spirited than they were 3 days ago. Of course, they didn't have the aura of a soldier. After all, they had only trained for 3 days. It was good enough that these people could stand straight now. And these 240 people were all wearing the camouflage uniforms that Jiang Hai and the others entered. Jiang Hai didn't lie to them. These clothes were indeed military products. The United States was different from China. In China, military products were not so easy to see. This was because most of the things were mainly for the military. In the United States, the military and civilian industries were actually mixed together. The American arms giants all appeared in the world in the form of companies. If the military wanted something, they would put forward an idea. For example, if the military wanted to fight in the desert, underwater, cold weather, and so on. After the request was made, these arms companies would go back to their own companies to research. They would not go to the National Academy of Sciences, or something like that. When the deadline was up, they would bring out the research results. If the military picked something, it would be a jackpot. It was as simple as that. In addition to supplying the military, this company also sold to the outside world. For example, the civilian version of those firearms. Who do you think produced them? These military uniforms were exactly the same as those of the United States military. The only difference was that Jiang Hai didn't have epaulets or collar badges. With these, he was actually a real soldier. The camouflage uniform, belt, military boots, tactical vest, leggings, and water bottle were all fitted according to the standards of the Sea Nation Marine Corps. Moreover, they were the latest AWAR camouflage. After 2 days of showing off in China, this set of clothes had become very popular. The price had been raised to nearly 10,000 yuan per set. However, it only cost $420 to buy it here. Of course, $420 was enough for Jiang Hai and Winthrop to make a lot of money. Because Jiang Hai bought these clothes in bulk, each set only cost $160. The rest was profit. Jiang Hai was making money, and the tourists were happy. That was enough, wasn't it? These days, many people came to Jiang Hai to say that they wanted to buy a few more sets. However, Jiang Hai was using muscle marketing. If they didn't sign up, they couldn't buy it. As for the 60 people who didn't insist, they would rather give up the $150 registration fee and buy the clothes. As for the first batch of people who didn't sign up, they were also rubbing their hands and waiting for the second batch. Today was the 3rd day of training for these people. Tomorrow, they would enter the mountains. Therefore, Luo Jia wanted to teach these people what they could and couldn't touch in the mountains. Apart from snakes, spiders, and centipedes, which were obviously poisonous, ordinary lizards couldn't be touched. In addition, there were many plants that couldn't be touched. For example, there were many common plants in China: mungishri, balsam wheat, flying swallow grass, 8 immortal flowers, evening dew lily of the valley, and so on. Even morning glory was poisonous. Its stems, leaves, and flowers were all poisonous. The most poisonous was its seeds. If you accidentally ate them, you would vomit, have diarrhea, have bloody stools, urine, and so on. There were also acacia beans, southern sky bamboos, calla lilies, and so on. These were all poisonous. If Luo Jia didn't say it, even Jiang Hai wouldn't know, let alone these people. Many old people were willing to grow flowers in the mountains, especially those whose wives had retired. They liked to grow flowers because they had nothing to do. However, these people really didn't know that these plants were poisonous. Many people even had grandchildren at home. They had already decided to throw away these flowers when they went back. It was too much of a scam. For them, learning this kind of knowledge could be considered as earning some money. After class, they left early, However, before they left, Luo Jia divided them into groups of 20 people. There were a total of 13 teams, and each team was accompanied by 3 policemen and an interpreter. They also had GPS, satellite phones, and so on. Tomorrow morning, they would take a car and enter through 13 different entrances. Tomorrow morning, they would gather here at 8 o'clock sharp. If they were late, they wouldn't bring him. Jiang Hai was a little worried, so he would follow the oldest team. With him and Belle, the policeman could relax a little. After all, it was their first time entering the mountains. No one knew what would happen after entering the mountains, but it was still a try. Early the next morning, when Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the field with their shields, the 26 people were already divided into 13 groups of 20 people. The police were also ready. After Jiang Hai arrived, his shield was left here. He and Belle got into one of the cars and set off for the Alabama mountains together. The car that Jiang Hai and the others were in was a modified F-150. In fact, the other cars were also modified from F-150. This car was really cheap in the United States. More than $20,000 could buy a new car. Obviously, this car was not new. A second-hand car only cost a few $1,000s. As long as it had not been hit hard, this car was quite sturdy and had good off-road performance. The modification was very effective. At least, the old men around Jiang Hai were quite excited. After getting in the car, they had been taking photos. Although they couldn't go online, because the mobile phone card in China was different from the network used abroad. Unless they turned on global communication, they couldn't even make a phone call. Young people might be willing to turn on their mobile phones, but these old men couldn't. So they took photos now, and when they returned to the place where they lived tomorrow, they would use Wi-Fi to send the photos. But to be honest, even if they turned on roaming, it would be, haha. The internet in the US is famous for being slow. It's just like the 4G internet in China. It doesn't matter how many gigabytes it is. In terms of speed, South Korea is the fastest and China is the second fastest. So don't say that everything abroad was better than in China. At least in terms of network, express delivery, and so on, it was far worse than in China. After taking photos, an old man sitting next to Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai, "Little Jiang, have you been to the mountains before?" Jiang Hai and the others divided these old people into groups, mainly based on age and familiarity. If a few people knew each other, they would be divided into a group. If a few people were from the same family, they would be divided into a group. If they were not from the same family, they would be divided according to age. They were all in a group in their 20s, a group in their 30s, a group in their 40s, and a group in their 50s. Those above 60 were not allowed to sign up. So a group in their 50s was the limit. This grouping was also to avoid trouble, and at the same time, to let everyone have fun. And I have been there. Hearing the old man asking him, Jiang Hai also nodded and said to them with a smile, "Is it fun in the mountains? Are there any large beasts? What's there after going in?" Seeing that Jiang Hai had gone in, the uncles here all asked him. These people were still relatively close to Jiang Hai. Everyone knew that Jiang Hai was rich, but Jiang Hai didn't seem to have the bad temper of the nouveau riche in China. Instead, he was very polite and kind. He was worried that these old people wouldn't have fun, so he came to accompany them into the mountains. So these old people's impression of Jiang Hai was quite good. If it wasn't because they knew that this guy was a very lecherous person, they even wanted to introduce their juniors to Jiang Hai. It's just a normal primitive forest. Our vehicles have to stop outside the forest, because there's almost no road for vehicles to move forward. It seems that only my off-road vehicle can move forward in the entire town. After entering the forest, you'll see a lot of trees, grass, and animals. However, we can hunt some of them, and some of them we can't. After entering the forest, we just need to listen to the police. But you can rest assured that there will be enough prey for you to hunt inside. Looking at these excited uncles, Jiang Hai smiled and told them in detail about the Alabama mountain range. Jiang Hai had already entered this mountain range 6 or 7 times. Although it wasn't the same as his own courtyard, at least there wouldn't be any problems inside. Of course, this was the Alabama mountain range. If he went to a strange place, he would have to bring his family's little white and little yellow first. In the forest, these two guys were quite fierce. Chapter 870. The car soon arrived at the place where Jiang Hai's team was going to enter the mountain, because there were too many people this time. Therefore, in order to avoid bumping into each other in the forest, they entered the mountain from different places. The uncles in Jiang Hai's car maintained a state of extreme excitement all the way. When the car stopped, they also became excited. Next, we are going to enter the mountain. Everyone, come and get your equipment. After the car stopped, Jiang Hai also got out first. After translating the words of the four people sitting in front, the uncles also lined up and walked over. Before entering the mountain, they had already applied for the guns they needed. Many people asked for rifles. After all, compared to shotguns and hunting rifles, Huaxia people preferred rifles. In addition to rifles, two people also asked for hunting rifles. When they asked for hunting rifles, the people next to them were still laughing at them. But now when they saw the hunting rifles, they could not help but lick their lips. It seemed that hunting rifles were also good things. They were going into the mountain to hunt, not to fight at the front line. So the guns they asked for were very old models. For example, the rifle Jiang Hai's team was the M16, the oldest model, the one that was replaced after the Vietnam War. There were many problems, but this gun was enough to enter the mountain. Naturally, they used the civilian version 5.56mm bullets. There were only 5 bullets in the magazine, and they could not be shot consecutively. They were the kind that could only be shot once. Each person was given 5 magazines, plus a box of 200 bullets. After they returned, they would know how many bullets they had used. As for the shotgun, it was indeed much more powerful than the rifle. The hunting rifles that these people were given were double-barreled hunting rifles that fired deer pellets. Each pellet was as thick as an adult man's thumb. The rows of pellets hung diagonally on their bodies like Lamborghini. They looked much more powerful than the civilian version of the M16. For a while, the two uncles who got hunting rifles kept taking photos, making the people next to them envious. In addition to the guns, the police also gave them a lot of things, such as mineral water. However, they were required to put it in a water bottle. Plastic bottles were not allowed to be brought into the mountain, because they were afraid that the tourists would throw them away. There was also a Swiss Army knife. Of course, it wasn't the expensive kind. It cost $3. The money was from the state government as a benefit for them. They could bring the knives back to China. There was also a set of quick heat rations for military use, which would come in handy if they couldn't find any prey. After everything was prepared, everyone was ready to enter the mountain. All right, everyone get ready. We're going to enter the mountain. Before we enter the mountain, I'll repeat my requirements. No one is allowed to run around casually, touch anything, or leave the team. If you need to go to the toilet, call us. You're not allowed to leave quietly, because we won't know if you go to the toilet. It's very likely that we'll really leave you behind. The trees in this forest are very dense, and we can't see anyone within 10 meters. If you shout loudly, it's very likely that you won't attract us, but beasts. Looking at the uncles in front of them, the police officer who was sent in front of them had been explaining the rules with the help of an interpreter. After hearing the man's words, the uncles couldn't help but nod, indicating that they understood. After seeing that they almost understood, the police also led the team into the forest. Jiang Hai and Belle were at the back to prevent anyone from falling behind. Walking into the forest, the uncles were so nervous that they didn't talk much. Indeed, the forest on this side of the Alabama mountains was very scary. Because of the lush vegetation, as soon as they entered the mountain, they basically couldn't see the sun. There was a kind of gloomy feeling everywhere. There were thick straw mats under their feet. These mats were made of withered grass and fallen leaves. When they stepped on them, they would sink a few centimeters deep. When they lifted their feet, they would find water, and even some insects. Many of the insects were told by Rogada Carter that they were poisonous. So when they saw these insects, they were also a little scared. Along the way, these people walked carefully in front. Even if it was hot, no one took off their helmet or anything like that. Instead, they had been paying attention to the situation around them. After walking for about an hour, the police in front stopped at a clearing in the forest that had been cleaned up. Everyone take a break here first. You can take off your helmet, but you can't take off your shoes. You can sit for a while. Hearing the police officer's words, the uncles here breathed a sigh of relief. Then they all sat on the ground. They finally understood why they had to do 3 days of physical training first. Otherwise, they didn't know how many people would fall behind on the road ahead. They used to climb mountains in China, but the mountains in China were completely different from the ones in the Alabama mountains. There were roads made by people. Even if it was a dirt road, it was actually not very difficult to walk. But here there was no road at all. In the forest there were deep and shallow steps. If they didn't go through training, they would be lucky if they didn't get sprained. However, although they felt a little tired, they felt that it was worth it. This experience was enough for them to brag about when they went back. Next, we will enter the depths of the forest. This is where we will be hunting. Because most of the animals here are protected, I will not allow you to shoot as you wish. If you discover a herd of deer or wild boars, I will call you. Only then can you hunt. You are not allowed to shoot other animals. If you insist on shooting them, that is fine. But the United States is the same as China. If you shoot wild animals, you will be sued. Looking at these uncles sitting here, the police officer in front couldn't help but say to them. After hearing what the police officer said, many uncles who had other thoughts couldn't help but restrain their thoughts. If they only had a problem with Winthrop, then it would be fine. If they were sued in the United States, then the loss would outweigh the gain. After resting here for half an hour, everyone set off again. They had to rush to a small stream to rest at noon. If they didn't leave now, it would be too late. Although this team was a team with preferential treatment, they couldn't be too slow, right? After walking for almost an hour, at around 11 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived at the place where they were going to camp. The stream wasn't wide, but it flowed very fast. Jiang Hai glanced at it and saw that there were no fish in the stream. It seemed that they had to go to the forest for lunch. After removing some gravel and sprinkling insect repellent, the police officer led everyone to a place where they could eat lunch temporarily. Then the police officer set up 2 shelves with pots that could be used to cook things. Seeing that they were done, Jiang Hai also told 2 of the police officers that he and Belle would bring another police officer to hunt. After that, Jiang Hai and the others were about to leave. But before leaving, the uncle who had been talking to Jiang Hai stopped Jiang Hai. Little Jiang, are you going to go hunting? Looking at Jiang Hai, the uncle said with a face full of excitement. I'm going to get you some food. Hearing the uncle's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. There was nothing to hide. Can we go with you? When he heard that Jiang Hai was really going hunting, the uncle here asked him eagerly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's first thought was to refuse, but after thinking about it, it seemed that it didn't matter. You can go, but you can't take a gun, and there can't be too many people. Looking at this man, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said, Okay, just me. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, the uncle here couldn't help but laugh. Then he went back and gave the gun to a person he was familiar with, and then followed Jiang Hai into the forest. Little Jiang, I didn't find any wild animals along the way. Is it reliable? Following Jiang Hai, the uncle here said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also patiently explained to him. This is just the periphery, belonging to the buffer zone between wild animals and humans. After this stream, you will be in the real mountain, so there are not many wild animals, plus there are too many of us. Some animals see us from afar and flee into the mountain, so except for birds you can't see anything. Jiang Hai looked around and explained to the uncle. Just now in the car. This uncle's name is Zhao Zhan. He is an engineer in China, and used to be a soldier. His foundation is not bad. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Zhan said, to show that he understood. But at this moment, Jiang Hai suddenly waved his hand, and motioned for everyone to stop. Then he took out a metal cube from his backpack. As Jiang Hai's hand shook, the metal cube instantly became a metal bow. This is the bow that Jiang Hai specially ordered a while ago. The maximum pulling force was 320 pounds. Most people wouldn't even think about it. It was terrifying. Arrows could be shot up to 500 meters away. Of course, if they were shot that far, they wouldn't be accurate. However, at a distance of 300 to 400 meters, the lethality was still quite high. Seeing Jiang Hai take out the bow, Zhao Zhan also stopped talking. But he has been looking around and didn't find any prey. However, Jiang Hai slowly took out his own retractable arrow and placed it on the bow. After aiming, he instantly pulled the bow to its limit and shot the arrow horizontally. The arrow flew past, and not long after, the bushes on the other side exploded. Screams continued to ring out. Jiang Hai and the others also quickly walked over through the grass. Walking to the front, Zhao Zhan saw a big bird with its mouth pierced through. It was lying on the ground struggling, and the blood kept flowing out, making it have no strength to stand up again. But it is worthy of being a wild animal. It has lost so much blood, but it is still not dead and has not given up. Its vitality is really strong. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.